Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I call the meeting to order. Trustee, call the roll, please.
Frank Neuer.
Here.
Stephen Greenfield.
Here.
Amy Heminger.
Here.
Dominic Mafacci.
Here.
Ruth Quinn.
Present.
Timothy Rogers. Julie Tresco. Here.
Everyone stand for the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brings us to agenda changes. Do we have any agenda changes?
Yes, I have a proposed addition for a time-sensitive matter, a proposed resolution, and I would suggest that it be added just before the consent agenda. Item 12 to 11 and 12. That way, anybody who has to make presentations or answer questions can already be behind, as far as I can tell from the rest of the agenda.
What's the purpose of the proposed resolution?
To discuss the resolution pertaining to confidence or lack thereof in municipal as our advocates. Just mentioned right now. Wherever it might want to go, where we put in other discussion perhaps, yeah, that's fine.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
So it's like the second
We have a motion and a second to add this federal item to new business.
14.2.
Introduction. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? One. Passes 6-1. Okay. It's time for Spotlight on Program. Presentation from the Paltz High School 3D Imaging Fabrication.
I'd like to introduce Mrs. Clinton, who actually needs no introduction. Principal Clinton will then introduce this wonderful group of students and the two teachers that work on this program.
Thank you. Once again, it's a great opportunity for us to showcase the work that we do at the high school. I say we, that's really a misnomer. It's the work that they do at the high school. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jen Cohn and Alexis Mallory, who will talk about our program having to deal with, well, they'll tell you.
So we have been for a while doing 3D modeling, both Ms. Alexis Mallory and myself, in our engineering and design classes. And so that's not the new part of it. Alexis has been working with the college for a number of years with the engineering department, has a strong relationship with them, as well as with the art ed department as well. So this came up that the SUNY Paltz was creating the initiative to do the 3D imaging and fabrication program. So in turn, we've kind of kept up communication with them, and through that communication and through the relationships that we've built up over the years, we were able to have donated to us the two 3D printers, the MakerBot Replicator 2, which is sort of outdated already, if you can believe that. But so we would like to also just mention that Daniel Friedman, the Dean of Engineering, and Paul Cassell, who was the temporary Dean of Fine Arts, and Mike Otis, who is part of the engineering department, really were, instrumental in ensuring that we received the printers for the school. They also gifted us like a participation in one of the courses that they ran, and they were just really supportive, Kat Wilson and Arthur Hash at the college. So just a sort of background on what the college is doing, because that sort of is why we are benefiting from, that program. So let's maybe talk about the college a little bit.
So with the support of the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corporation and other organizations, SUNY Paltz partnered with MakerBot, and that's who makes our 3D printers, and created the MakerBot Innovation Center. And at the college, I believe there's 28 MakerBots. It's just rows and rows of 3D printers. And in the near future, SUNY will house the expanded Hudson Valley Advanced Manufacturing Center, and even more growth is coming because we're looking at, or they're looking at a $10 million grant from Governor Cuomo. So it's a very exciting time for us, especially with the 3D printers and with things that we're now able to incorporate into our curriculum.
We want to introduce the students that are here. We have Hunter Marawa, Jessica Merton, Alicia Tamarchenko, George Williamson,
And then a couple of the engineering students, I have Nicole Olarsh and Mia DeMaio.
they're going to take over.
Do we have a technology teacher here?
I can.
Okay.
Should we turn the lights on?
Yes.
Hi, I'm just going to talk about the MakerBot Replicator 2 itself. The MakerBot Replicator 2 is made by MakerBot and is mostly used for design and engineering, visualization, and prototyping, as well as printing of usable objects. The MakerBot Replicator 2 uses polylactic acid, which is bioplastic made from corn and is biodegradable. It is available in several textures and colors.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about the three-dimensional imaging visualization. So, a 3D print requires closed, or also called bar-type models. And original three-dimensional models can be created in programs such as Rhino or Blender, Inventor, SolidWorks, Google SketchUp, and others. But us students use like the user-friendly 3D modeling programs such as Sculptris and Autodesk Go to 3D Design.
The process for making a print. Right now you're doing the preview print. It's a setting in which you lay out your print in which order you want. Three-dimensional models are exported as STL, stereolithic graph files. STL files are sent through Makerware, a software-related setting are chosen for structural details, layering, slicing, and supporting material. It's the process in which you're looking at your model and how it'll show up in your print and fixing any other details you might have, or if there's holes in your area. The print setting is like the hardness or how much you want the width or structure of it. Right now, you'll be seeing a clear cut image into the area and how it will be made. In certain areas, you'll find if there's any problems with them, or if you have a certain setting, just as the standard, it will have immediate set structure, and it'll have a certain degree of hardness and how structurally sound you want it, or in front. Simple as that. The 3D printer right here uses fusible, dissolvable, or removable support material. it basically spews it out in using the spools, as you can see in that material right there. It heats it up in the process and simply goes layer by layer until it builds enough layers to have the whole 3D model printed.
Oh, you said video?
Yeah. Right now, currently 3D printing is used in engineering, robotics, architecture, industrial design, aeronautics, and medical and scientific innovations. Medical, they're printing up skin for people who have flesh-eating diseases or such as that. Scientific innovations, we're using it such as making lightweight parts for aeronautics, and they're using the innovation to replicate certain areas in our body, such as bone joints and such like that. Robotics, it's used for making prototypes or working prototypes to show what will happen in certain areas, if it's strong enough or it needs to be tweaked a little bit in certain areas.
The video's not working, so it's just what it's doing.
And the and other such uses are the aeronautics. It's being used to make lighter parts and lighter tubes or such as that. That's imaging and
Alright, so the imaging and fabrication in the classroom. The New Paltz High School students are able to participate in the assignments where they design and print objects. Well, in these programs, we use these programs on the computer. Like, I don't know if any of you heard of it, Rhino. Rhino is stuff where we design our own models and we create our own stuff. And we print them out like necklaces and stuff, and we make toys, sometimes jewelry designs, and figures and fashion designs, and custom phone cases and stuff. And yeah.
Well, we want to read the whole slide. Were you guys having following the slide? Yeah, let's just pass the sheet so that whoever was practiced for the slide.
Okay, so we address the STEAM curriculum, and that stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math. And the link there just shows the article in the newspaper. So in the engineering and design course, in IED last spring, we designed a tic-tac-toe board with thematic pieces on a computer program called Inventor. And then we created the models on the 3D printer. Students had to consider printing constraints and tolerances so pieces would fit together properly. We designed our base and lid uniformly for ease of 3D printing, but we added thematic details to individualize our design.
So afterwards, we were able to paint our 3D tic-tac-toes. It was encouraged, and it was a lot of fun. CEA made household furnishings to embellish their designs. CEA will also be looking to create actual models of architectural designs, and creating working prototypes will be simplified with the 3D printer and engineering design.
Okay, so last year with Ms. Cruz and Mr. Martin's computer graphics class, we took a field trip to New York City, and we went to the Museum of Art and Design, where there was a 3D exhibit, which was called Out of Hand. There was multiple things going on there, and we saw a full body scanner, which is pretty much where they let a person stand on a platform while it was spinning around, and they scan their body, and then you could purchase your own little minifigure of yourself, which was pretty cool. And there was pretty much anything. It went from decor of furniture, lamps, to fashion design. They had shoes, dresses, bikinis, tons of cool stuff. And there was also a fine art section and a whole innovation section.
In our computer graphics course last year, we used Sculptress to create creatures and 123D Design to create symbolic pendants. All three of them were made on Sculptress, and on Sculptress, it's basically a ball of like digital clay, and you get to figure the clay as you wish with certain tools, and you can create almost anything using that, and it's simple and easy and helps you get ready for the bigger programs such as 123D Design. These three were made on 123D Design, which is one step up from Sculptress, and it's kind of hard to describe the program unless you're physically doing it, but on Sculptress, 123D Design, you can create almost anything you can imagine. These are just some of the projects that we did in computer graphics that we printed. For example, on the bottom right corner, there's a tiara, and I personally created that. And it's a replica from my Sweet 16, and in it is engraved the date from my party, because it symbolizes me, and it was like, just symbolizes a great night. So we got to create these wonderful pendants that could help describe us as a person.
This is the DD class, the SUNY field trip campus. If you see in the middle, the kid in all lead is getting his head 3D printing. He's starting to get a scan of it. It takes a process. He has to be very still, or he can cause it to mess up. And the guy shifts around on a chair, getting an image of it, and then that translates into a computer, and it's rasterized or kind of developed into the 3D model. And then on the left-hand side upper corner, you'll notice that all the 3D printers in a line, and they probably in the middle one, all these 3 hand printed is being developed. In the DDP class, we created some custom bottles, keychains, and monsters. And we use the programs such as Rhino, 123 Design, and also Sculptress. And it was a really fun experience, and it took some time and effort, but it came out extremely amazing at the end. Alright, yeah, these are some of the designs that we created. Actually, one of mine are up there. It's the little stick figure guy. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah. I'm a professional. The other one over there, the little bottle thing, beside the blue, that's one of the bottles we made, and it was a pretty good experience.
And that was the end.
First of all, this is a lot of fun to see. How many students in total participated, and what grades?
Most of the students were, I don't know the exact amount, but there was lots of people who participated in this program, and it was from 9th to all the way to I believe 12, and they took in computer graphics, DDP, and engineering classes.
At least 100 students, sorry.
you have an understanding of how the fabricator is rendering the red plastic from the spool into something that's actually executing the 3D print?
Well, it's, say if we have a computer hooked up to this, we'll send an image to this, and it will develop it into its own component, and it will see an image, and it will translate it into layers upon layers. It doesn't draw the image, it kind of starts from the bottom and works its way to the top in a honeycomb type way. It's not fully solid, but it's a strong enough material where it can last over time, and it's light enough where it can be machined like this.
But is the plastic itself, as it's leaving the spool and going through that arm down, is it being softened through a chemical process, a heat process?
It's
You know, how
heated. It's a heated process.
It's a heating process.
Is there any other questions?
Well, I think they're great.
I was just going to add, we're printing a little stretchlet that came with the MakerBot software, and you can pass it around. But just to show you, it's not the fastest technology in the world. A lot of people think you can, produce 100 little things in an hour, but like the dragon that you saw took, I think, 5 hours just to do the head. So the finer the detail, the longer the print is going to take. So it can be very time-consuming.
Going along with the time consuming, did you see, there was an article or a bit on the news, there was a totally 3D fabricated house that you could put together for about $86,000, and they constructed it in London, and every part was created through this 3D printer.
Yes.
They don't know if it's going to last through the weather, but this is the beginning of a future that I'm sure everything will be perfected, and maybe one or two or many of you are going to be on the cutting edge of perfecting these kinds of things. I know Hunter's going to be teaching it soon.
It's really developing. It's rapidly developing. It's been around since the 80s, but it's moving so fast right now. It really has a lot of momentum. So it should really change quite drastically over the years.
I just want to say, as a little aside, is that the price has come down so drastically in 3D printers that I believe that eventually we'll see them, and everybody will have them in their home. Thank you. Make little goodies.
Once again, thank you guys.
If I can just make a couple of comments. I'd just like to acknowledge all the work that the kids did. The excellent question, how many participate, they underestimated it. It's grades 9 through 12, and we've been doing this for a number of years now. So we took a count the other day, and it's well over 500 students that have actually been involved in the Project Lead the Way program, and what we used to call the STEM program, the science, technology, engineering and math. And I have to give Ms. Cohn credit for making sure that I, update all my information and talk about it in terms of the STEAM project. Because actually, SUNY New Paltz really is, you're right at the forefront of all of this, to making sure that we emphasize the components of creativity and making sure that the arts are included in the process, and making sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in this program, which is really what it is. It's across the board. It's not an AP type program. It's for everybody. It's a required, the DDP is one of the core 9th grade art classes that students, have an opportunity to take when they enter the building. So it's great. And finally, Ms. Cohn, Ms. Mallory, and all the teachers that are involved in it just done an excellent job doing their staff development on their own, because this is something that, because they're so passionate about and want to make sure that the kids really are college and career ready, that they've done a tremendous amount of work. And in addition to the college, it's been good. And you people, thank you.
It's not very nice, perfect timing. So, and this is like sort of flexible, this is the way it's modeled, and so. Yeah. Yes, for rapid. Door prize.
How come that one's small?
It's just the way it's modeled, so it's so thin, the plastic is flexible.
Send it around and bring it
Design
back
is
so they can see.
it is so thin.
So that one is designed, that's why the other one's.
Right, yeah. You can also do interior blocking, we just haven't gotten I haven't, anyway, you probably have it, the interlocking, you can create interlocking prints and all sorts of complex geometry that, you know, will eventually get more and more sophisticated.
I think we were first introduced about 3D printing when you did it with your engineering classes. Remember that you were able to design the solar cars for the college, and then the best design is what they would build in race. And I mean, it has been quite some time, Mrs. Clinton. We're glad you opened the door to get us going on all of these innovations and hired the right people to do this.
And we've been doing 3D modeling for years, both
Yes.
of us, either
Yes,
graphically, you know, for graphic purposes, or for design purposes, or for engineering purposes. That part of it we've been doing. So this just really kind of gives us that extra piece to it that you wouldn't see otherwise.
So the stuff that's on the school, is it completely dissolvable? It's not,
Well,
there's
this
no
isn't the
petrochemicals at all?
dissolvable. This isn't the support material. This isn't dissolvable as far as in a model. But the other versions of these machines have material that you put and soak it in lye. You know, that's a little more. We're not going to have that here.
No.
This support material you cut out. You remove it. You know, you peel it off. You just break it off from the
But my
model.
question is, like, what is it made from?
This is polylactic acid. I know what this is. The dissolvable material is some type of dissolvable polymer, you know, that dissolves in acid. But while this doesn't, you know, so it'll keep this plastic but not the other. But this machine only has one type, so you just peel it off. It's not a chemical reaction. You don't want that in the school anyway. It's kind of toxic, you know.
Yeah.
So.
We're not into toxic.
Did that answer your question? I mean, I don't really know exactly what. Yeah, it's just, I don't know what type of plastic specifically that is that dissolves.
Because I thought in the presentation you had mentioned the corn-based dissolvable
That's
material.
it. This particular printer uses the corn base, it's biodegradable, is what it is. So it's made from corn products. But for the MakerBot Replicator 2X, for example, that's a different polymer, different plastic. So this particular one is biodegradable too.
So we are that's just really very green and very happy.
You know, it's not polluting. You know, I wouldn't say it's green
It's
per
red.
se. You know,
You're right, it's very red.
But this can be recycled. The material can be recycled. We don't have the capability here to recycle it, but we would take our prints over to college and they find uses for it. So, yeah, but that's a concern too. We don't want to produce a lot of stuff that we're going to throw away. You know, so the prints have to be ready. It isn't like we're just spewing out prints. You know, it is a kind of slow process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, that brings us to the public comment portion of the evening. If anyone would like to address the board, please step up to the microphone. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes if possible. Nobody, okay. That brings us to the student representative report. Julia Cullen, our new student representative.
Hi, I'm Julie Cohen, and I'm a senior at Paltz. I would like to briefly highlight the beginning of the school year. We are off to a great start. The school has given a warm welcome to all the new students. We are excited to be back. Miss Law and the Environmental Club, or Keeper of Court, the Guard as they call themselves, have made our green classroom more beautiful than ever. Teachers are using the garden for writing classes, photography, science, language, and even the cooking classes are able to use the herbs for recipes. We had 4 days of coffee in the courtyard where teachers and students were split into the days according to their last names. And the teachers helped and brought in breakfast and they made baked goods and all this stuff. And it showed the community aspect of our school. And NPZ filmed it and it was really great. And soon there will be art and snacks in the courtyard where the Environmental Club will be making healthy ethnic foods and giving out the recipes. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
On another note, we are having a great season for fall sports. Soccer, swimming, and cross country. New Paltz girls tennis is 9-1, which we haven't been for years. And the boys golf team is undefeated. And the football team won the homecoming game this Friday. And after the game, many of the students went and celebrated at the homecoming dance and had a great time. Pep rally, spirit week, and community lunch will be October 17th. We are all excited to dress crazy for a week and show some school spirit. And seniors are all having their senior portraits taken, and the rest of the school had picture day last week. And on a more serious note, guidance will be holding a college night at the high school tomorrow, and the PSATs are Saturday, October 18th. Also, several students from my No Mission Energies PIG class attended the building project meeting last week, and all are forming different opinions on it, and there's been a lot of discussions in a lot of my classes about it. Yeah, it's very cool. And we are looking forward to Thursday, October 9th, where Ms. Kurzban and other teachers will be holding a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. During all the lunch periods, we will dance and eat Hispanic food and desserts. And also there will be posters around the school highlighting the most influential Spanish figures. So far we are off to a great school year. We're all looking forward to these upcoming events.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, superintendent's reports.
Well, since she stole half the things I was going to say, I'm skipping right over the comments and going directly to introducing to you Megan Febby and Stephanie Shoemaker and Katie. Well, why don't you come down and introduce yourselves? These people are going to present to you the K-12 guidance plan. Be careful, Katie. You're so close.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Febby. I'm the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. With me, I have Sarah Olds from the high school, Jessica Peterson from the high school, Stephanie Shoemaker from the high school, as well as Katie Traz from the middle school.
And Stephanie holds also the title of Director of Guidance, and so thank you for that extra work that you do really well.
Absolutely. So this evening, we're going to be presenting the guidance plan for you for the 2014-2015 school year. There have been no major changes to the plan for this year. The slides we're going to view briefly highlight the things that have worked and the things that we will continue to do. I'd now like to introduce Katie Traz from the middle school, as well as Stephanie Shoemaker from the high school. They're going to present their respective buildings for you.
Hi, everybody. These are just some things that we wanted to highlight that's going on at the middle school. We really like to focus on our transition programs, not just the students coming up to the middle school from 5th grade, but also our 8th graders moving on to the high school. So in the summer, we have our big barbecue, which is really fun, the new student orientation where the kids get their walkers, their schedules, they walk around the building, meet the teachers, and we have some peer tutors and guides to walk around with them, show them around so they're a friendly face when they do start their first day at school. We also like to go into the 5th grade classrooms before the end of the year to teach them a little bit about what to expect, how the schedules work, because it's a big change for them coming to a building with teachers and switching classes and opening lockers. They get a lot of anxiety and they're nervous about that change. So we like to focus on helping them and making sure that they feel comfortable when they start with us. And our 8th graders moving on to the high school, we like to have high school students come down to our classrooms and talk to them about how the high school works, the block schedules, and what to expect when they get up here. And also we do high school scheduling appointments with our 8th grade students and their parents. We come up with 4-year plans for them, which we look at the home and careers. They do career interest surveys, which is a lot of fun. So that's what we like to focus on for our transition programs. Team building activities, guidance, we go into the gym classes a lot of times during the school year, especially with our 6th graders when they get back from Frost Valley, to get to know them better so that they know that they can always come to guidance if they have a problem. It's not a scary place. So that's fun for us. And then group counseling. We're always focusing on helping kids with, peer problems, home problems, anything that they want to talk about. So these are some highlights of the middle school.
We do a lot of different things. So I posted a lot of the college and career readiness activities that we've been running. A couple of them have to do with Naviance, which is the career and college planning program that we use at the high school. And we use it with all the grade levels for freshmen and sophomores. We do a lot of career-related activities, searches, which we tie into the Ulster Career Conference. And juniors and seniors use Naviance for college searches and managing their college applications. We're heavy into that right now. We're meeting with all the seniors, and they're using Naviance to submit their college materials, such as transcripts and letters of recommendation. Some other activities that we operate, we have run a big college fair in the spring. This past year, we decided to hook up with Walk Hill High School, and we had over 80 colleges spend the morning with us, and then they headed over to Walk Hill afterward, and we had great reviews by all the colleges that participated. This year, we're going to have a day where we have a group of art schools visit us. We get a lot of requests from art schools to come meet with our students, and so we thought it would be practical to have them all come one day. They're going to have a mini fair, and then they're going to do a portfolio review after that. We have an alumni day where our recent graduates come and talk to our students about their experiences and give tips and advice, and kind of what they learned in high school that they brought with them to college. We bring a group of students to the Hispanic College Fair at Middletown every year, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. We take a couple of field trips to colleges. We have one planned for November. Coming this week, and thanks for the plug, Julia, is College Night. We have some new panels, lots of new speakers this year, so I'm really excited about that. And that's for parents and students, all grade levels. Financial Aid Night will be coming up in December. Typically, in addition to the college night and college fair that we run, we have a lot of colleges visit us. We have over 80 colleges usually make individual appointments to meet with us and our students during the year. We've probably hosted, I'm going to say 20, maybe 25 already. The PSAT is coming up in a few weeks, and we will meet with our juniors and sophomores to talk with them about, setting up a calendar for when they're going to take the SAT and other college entrance exams. We helped set up a job fair this past 2 springs, and we're probably looking forward to doing that again, most likely. And we also bring all of our 10th grade students to the Ulster Career Conference, where they have an opportunity to sit in on panels and career areas that they've previously identified in some classroom guidance programs that we've done. And finally, this year we'll be implementing the New York State CDAS commencement credential, which will be available to special education students.
So those are the highlights. Does anyone have any questions?
Did you turn the lights on? It's a K-12 guidance plan, but you have not addressed the elementary component of it. Do you have slides for that, or are you going to speak to it?
We do not, but I can speak to it. At the elementary level, our social workers in each building partake in the guidance plan. So they do all of the work that is outlined in the plan for us. One of the major things that they do is work with the middle school for all of our students transitioning from 5th grade into 6th grade to make sure that it is a smooth transition.
So, actually, I have a question. Because we had a lab plan that we had to do. Did that inform this guidance plan at all? Making changes to the K-5?
That did not, no.
And then in terms of the CDOS, this is my second question. What are the diplomas now that a high school student can get? There's the Regents diploma. There's no longer a local diploma. It's now done only the CDOS of the Board of Education.
She's dying to answer that.
So there's the Regents diploma. There's also the Advanced Regents diploma. In order to get that, students need to take additional coursework in math and foreign language. and pass a few more Regents exams. There is a local diploma for students who are eligible for the safety net. That still is in existence for students who have IEPs, and if it's indicated on their IEP, there is a local diploma available. So those are the three different types. Correct, well, which has changed. The CDAWS actually is a credential that can supplement a Regents diploma or be in lieu of a high school diploma, and it, kind of the purpose is to show potential employers that students have gained work skills and knowledge to be able to take on an entry-level employment.
Thank you very much. I have a motion for item 7.1, request to approve the 2014-15 K-12 guidance plan.
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
This is 7-0.
Excellent, thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any objection to moving the external audit report up and down so that Mr. Harriet's here on the board? And at this time, I'm going to introduce Mr. Andrew Arias from Cooper Arias to give us our external audit report.
Thank you for moving me up. To be honest with you, I really doesn't mind. I'm used to sitting through board meetings, and I actually enjoy watching some of the things the different activities students are doing. I always seem to follow some interesting thing the students are doing, and then I got to come in and sort of talk about how it gets all paid for. So I see there's some new board members here. My name is Andrew Arias. I'm with Cooper Arias, and we are the external auditors for the New Paltz School District. And I'm just going to do a sort of a brief overview of the fiscal year ended in June 30, 2014. You have a handout in front of you, which is what I'm going to speak from right here. It's actually not up on the PowerPoint screen, but some of the charts and graphs are going to be on here, what I'm going to talk from. Before I go into the board meetings, I always like to just quickly talk about what we do as auditors. There are several parts that we have to do as an audit. We look at your internal controls, because it is a government audit, so we have to look at your internal controls. But we're looking at it to determine if we can rely on them. If they're good enough that we can rely on to give an opinion on your financial statements. And we have to look at your compliance with laws and regulations. And then, of course, we look at the numbers in your financial statements. So basically, we're giving an opinion on those financial statements and using the internal controls to come to that opinion. You also get what's called a federal single audit. Any municipality that expends over $500,000 in federal money has to get a federal single audit where we look at your internal controls and compliance specifically over federal programs. The threshold for that is any expenditures over $500,000. It is moving up to $750,000 in 2016. It probably won't affect New Paltz. This year you have a little over $1 million in federal expenditure. So the increased threshold probably won't make a difference in terms of getting a federal single audit. And basically what we're giving is an opinion on fairly presented financial statements. So if someone looks at this audit report, whether it be state education department, a taxpayer, a bank, looks at it, will they be misled by the numbers in the financial statements? That's basically what our opinion is doing. The first chart just goes through your general fund balance, two components. The first part is your total fund balance. You sort of see through the last 5 years, your total fund balance came down, went back up and down a little bit. The current year decrease in fund balance was a planned decrease. When you appropriate fund balance in the budget, obviously, you're planning to decrease your fund balance. So that is pretty much was an expected decrease. Your restricted fund balance, you see the drop there. That was the expenditures out of your employee benefit reserve. You spent $46,000 out of that to pay off retiring teachers, accrued sick time when they leave the district, and you also expend $500,000 out of your capital reserve. That was the voter-approved project, and the money was transferred over to the capital projects fund for that project. The next chart goes through two components of your fund balance, unassigned and appropriated. These are two sort of important parts of it. The unassigned is the light blue, and that is the leftover, the residual portion of your general fund balance that is subject to the 4% of the subsequent year's budget. That's not reserved, it's not appropriated, it's not encumbered. That's what's left over at the end of the year. The dark blue is what you're appropriating in the next year's budget. And when you look at this chart, what you want to look at is that relationship between your unassigned and your appropriated. The district right now is a very low unassigned fund balance. But you also look at the appropriated, which is almost 7 times your unassigned fund balance. And one of the concerns there is when you're appropriating so much more than you have in an unassigned fund balance, is that if your budget comes in right and your fund balance decreases again, you may not have that money to appropriate again next year. So you always have to be careful in looking at relationships between your appropriated fund balance and your unassigned. Ideally, your appropriated fund balance should be less than your unassigned. Now, I understand sometimes that is the theory, and it's not always easy, especially with tax cap limitations and what you can do in terms of managing your fund balance. But just as you go from year to year, one of the things just to sort of keep in mind is ideally when you're appropriating the budget, you want that number to be less than what your unassigned fund balance. Now, obviously, when your unassigned fund balance is very low, you can't just appropriate $200,000 because you'll have to exceed the tax cap in order to balance your budget. But there are other implications and problems with that. That's the ideal what you're looking for when you're managing your fund balance. This just shows you the last few years, the activity in the general fund budget expenses. As you can see in the bottom, it talks about your percentage under budget. The budgets have been fairly good in the district. They're 2%. Within 2%, last year 1.3% of the budget. You're always going to come in under budget because you have to be conservative in a school district. Obviously, you can't expend more than the voters approved, so you can't just sort of budget low, and then if you need, like a town, you just appropriate more fund balance if they have to spend more than the original budget, where a school district can't do that. So you always have to be a little bit conservative on the expenditure side of your budgets. You would always expect to have your actual coming under your budget. The closer it gets to that budget, the more accurate, obviously, it is. And it is very critical when you're managing fund balance and when you have a low fund balance to have accurate budgets, obviously, because if your budgets are way off, it can easily push that fund balance into a deficit. The next chart shows the budgeted revenue side. Now, the revenue is a little bit different. Unlike the expenses, if you come in under or over the revenue side, it's not like you can't come in under revenues or over revenues. But as you can see in the last several years, the revenue side of the equation in this district has been extremely accurate. This year you were within 0.64% of your revenue, and most of that had to do with money that was being transferred back into the general fund from old capital projects, and the money is no longer being used. Actually, your budget was within about $10,000 on the revenue side in a $51 million budget, which is an extremely good budget in terms of accurate. The only concern I would say in looking at the revenue side, normally, we always say when you're looking at the revenue, you don't want to over budget revenues. Because if you over budget and you come in under, then again, that could cause a problem. But it's even more important when you have a low fund balance. If you're a district that has a high fund balance and you have an 8% fund balance, and you're trying to get it down, if your expenses come in, under your budget, so your fund balance comes down a little bit. When you have a low fund balance, as this district does, you really have to be accurate. As you can see from this chart, the district has been extremely accurate over the last several years in budgeting their revenues. And this just gives it sort of the activity each year. It shows your revenues, your expenses, and your net income loss each year over the last 5 years. The far right column, that's that percentage of the next year's budget. As you can see, the district every year has been extremely low. The limit there is 4% of the subsequent year's budget. We have a lot of districts that are exceeding that 4%, trying to get their fund balance. You've seen probably a lot of the state controller reports. This district obviously is just the opposite. You've stayed well within the limitation on fund balance every year. The increases this year, you see the expenses increased pretty significantly. Main reasons for that, the teacher retirement system rates increased 37% this year. That was an extra $1 million in expenses in the district. It's an extra expense all school districts have to deal with. It's the same rate for everybody. Your special ed costs went up about $1 million, and you've also had the $500,000 capital reserve transfer. So those three things made up for the vast majority of that big increase that you're seeing in the actual expenses from the last several years to this year. Going to your school lunch fund is something we've spoken about the last few years. Gradually, that school lunch fund, you see the fund balance has been going down over the last several years. Currently, your fund balance is about, I believe it's about $40,000, which is all in inventory. There was an $83,000 transfer from the general fund to sort of eliminate that deficit in the school lunch fund, which you can do. But it is something you have to look at when you look at your school lunch fund, how you're going to address the operating deficit. Is it going to be with larger transfers from the general fund, which it can be? It's going to be increasing prices, reducing costs. You have three options, but you have to look at that school lunch fund budget and make that decision, how you're going to do it. In terms of bringing, at least have your operations being not in a deficit every year. You want to operate in surplus or about a break even. Some of the other balances you have, your debt service fund. We haven't done much with that the last few years, but that is about $400,000 that's available to offset debt service costs in the future. So if you have a year where the budget's tough, you can transfer money from the debt service fund to help offset some of your debt service costs. And you see capital reserve was dropped a lot this year, and again, that was that $500,000 that came out of the capital reserve this year. And as you know, you do need the voter approval to spend that money. So unlike some of the other reserves where the board can control it, a capital reserve obviously needs that voter approval. And here's just a quick chart talking about the retirement costs over the last several years. As I mentioned, the TRS cost increased about 37%, and the employee retirement costs were about 11% the increases were. Now next year, the TRS is going to increase about 8%, so a much smaller increase, but still an increase, and the employee retirement system is actually expected to decrease 3%. What you're looking at when they calculate these rates, they use sort of a 5-year average. And with the 2008 stock market year sort of dropping off of that 5-year average returns, they are expecting, absent another stock market crash, that these rates should turn and start coming down again, because the 5-year average of returns will no longer include 2008 when we had the big crash in the stock market. So that should be some relief in terms of the expenses for all school districts. So the general fund, the fund balance for the year decreased $1.1 million. Of that decrease, you decreased your reserves $544,000, which we spoke about how you spent that money. You also, your encumbrances decreased. Again, when you have a very accurate budget, obviously you're not going to have as many encumbrances either when you carry forward, because you're spending what you're budgeting. So you're not rolling forward those encumbrances. And you increase the amount you appropriated in the budget. You appropriated an extra $487,000 towards the next year's tax levy. So that left your unassigned fund balance decreasing $765,000 for the year, and you currently have an unassigned fund balance of $251,000, which is 0.47% of the subsequent year's budget. Like I mentioned, the 4% is the limit, and you're currently at 0.4%. Something to watch very closely in terms of doing your budget going forward. So you want to try to increase it gradually if you can. As you get money, try to let that fund balance rise. It's in the last couple of years, some years it went up, some years it went down, but it has stayed in the positive. And the appropriated fund balance is $1.68 million. I mentioned that exceeds the unassigned by about 7 times. So again, it is a potential budget goal. I mean, if your budget were, if your fund balance were to decrease $1 million again this year, you're not going to have that $1.68 million anymore to appropriate in the budget. So it's something you really got to keep an eye on. So you really want to try to get the appropriated below the unassigned fund balance. So a combination of decreasing what you appropriate, increasing your unassigned fund balance at the same time. So the ability to manage the low fund balance is dependent on accurate budget. If you have that lower fund balance, or really any kind of fund balance management, you need to have an accurate budget. And this district does have a very accurate budget every year. It's always really within that 1%, 2% of what you're budgeting. And I mentioned earlier, just be conservative when dealing with a low fund balance. You're better to under budget your revenues and over budget expenses when you're dealing with a low fund balance. You don't want it to be the other way around, because you don't have that cushion to fall back on if it goes the other way. And the district right now has very little set aside in reserves. Obviously, if you don't have that fund balance, you don't have money to put in reserves. But obviously, if you are able to start building a fund balance, and you do want to consider putting money in reserves, you want to look at the reserves. And one of the things I was talking about is just be careful as to which reserves you use. There are some reserves that have restrictions on them, and some reserves that the board has more control over those reserves. So when it gets to that point, you sort of want to just make sure what reserves you're using to put that money in. School lunch fund I spoke about, that fund balance increased $11,000. It was subsidized with an $83,000 transfer. It would have been a decrease without the transfer. The current fund balance of $40,000 is mainly inventory. So you want to adjust the operating deficit and the low fund balance. The state ed will say 30% of expenditures is what they consider to be a reasonable fund balance in the school lunch fund. So as you're looking at the school lunch fund, it starts increasing again. About $250,000 would represent about 30% of this district. Okay, that's not the statutory restriction like the 4%, but it's a number they look at when they talk about what do they think should be a reasonable fund balance for a school lunch fund. Capital Projects Fund, $500,000 was transferred in from the capital reserve, of which you expended $48,000. There were other expenses in there related to the final drawdown of the energy performance contract, and there was $305,000 in unused funds that was transferred back to the general funds. These are funds that weren't related to debt finance projects, which in that case they would have to go to the debt service fund, otherwise the money would go back to the general fund where it came. You're seeing the law over federal programs, you look at your internal controls and compliance, no significant deficiencies or non-compliance, so you do get an unmodified opinion on your federal programs. We will be uploading the data collection form to the federal government. Currently, their website is down again like it was last year, so they need a new tech guy or something, but we do have it on our list, and as soon as the site comes back up again, they have extended the deadline for these data collection forms. As soon as it comes up again, we will fill out the data collection form, we send it to the district to review and certify, and it will be uploaded as soon as the website is ready. The management letter, we did discuss all our findings in detail with the audit committee. In the audit committee, we discussed verbal issues. All of the comments this year were verbal, and as you say, the district did address all of the recommendations that we had in the previous year, and we do like to see that, obviously, if we have comments, we want to see that they're being addressed in the next year. So we had no written comments in the management letter. Only comments were any verbal comments we discussed with you. And you get an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, which means it's in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Just real quickly, your GASB 45 retiree health insurance liability, that's a very large liability in your financial statements. There is a detailed note disclosure in there. The actuarial accrued liability for the district is $119 million at this point, and that's sort of the present value of the future health insurance that you're going to be paying to your retirees, calculated by an actuary. It gets amortized into your financials over 30 years. So in your financials currently, you're showing a liability of $36.5 million in your statement of net position. If you're looking at your audit report on page 11, you'll see a big negative unrestricted net position. That's entirely caused by this liability. There's no way to fund it. It doesn't affect your governmental funds. It doesn't affect your tax levy, your fund balance, your budgeting, anything like that. It's just strictly a number that goes into your full accrual statements. And just some of the upcoming GASB pronouncements. GASB 68, effective June 30th of 15. They are now going to have another actuarially calculated liability. It's going to be future pension costs. So now all municipalities are going to be required to put in their financials what is the value of all the future pension costs that are going to be paid, which will be another extremely large number, like the GASB 45 number. It too will go into your full accrual statements. It won't affect what you do on a day-to-day basis. Fortunately, you don't have to hire an actuary for this one. Retirement systems have to get the number calculated in their system, and then they will give each of the participating employers their share of that liability. So it will be provided to you. We'll have to probably do a 2 or 3 page note disclosure talking about assumptions and things like that, and then put the number in there. But again, it'll probably be another very large liability in the financial statements. And a proposed change to the GASB 45 that I just spoke about, sort of an actuarial thing. They're talking about changing the actuarially expected liability rather than the actuarially accrued liability, which is in actuarial calculations makes a very significant difference. If they switch to that $119 million liability will be significantly larger. So we're talking about at some point, pretty much most school districts with this retiree health insurance, GASB 45, and the GASB 68 pension costs, going to have this extremely large liability on their financial statements, but again, only in the full accrual statements, not affecting where you raise taxes and manage your fund balance, and you can't fund those. So we'll keep the business office and the audit committee informed as more guidance is issued as to how these will be into your financial statements. So like I said, overall, low fund balance, but very accurate budgeting, which is necessary. So if anybody has any questions about anything in the audit report or anything I said today?
Could you email this to Dusty so that she can get it online and report?
Sure. You want the actual audit report, or you don't have the electronic copy of the report?
She has a report, she doesn't.
Okay, I'll send you that, that's fine.
Is there a statutory limit on how much general fund money can be used to subsidize the cafeteria?
I'm not opposed to any kind of limit on that. The general fund can subsidize it. There's no limit.
Is there an anticipation that the TRS contribution will go down in the future?
Well, that's, like I mentioned, that's what the rate is obviously calculated on the past history of the market. And with 2008 dropping off that calculation, they're anticipating that it will go down. Of course, we never know what's going to happen. But if 2008 drops off and the market just sort of stays like what it's been doing, the new 5-year average of returns in their calculations, their actuarial calculations, will be higher returns, and we would anticipate those rates to start dropping. And as you know, there's been a lot of fluctuation. At one point, they used to be like less than 1%, and then they went, much significantly higher.
So we've seen that. Looks like the estimate from 2008 2014, 15 pre-RS is actually.
That's already dropping from 20 to 18%, about a 3% drop. It comes out, and actually they're looking at projected long-term rates down around 11% for 3 years. But again, that could change quickly. It all depends on what happens in the stock market. That's what those actuarial calculations are based on. Even the GASB 25 calculations, they could change drastically just if somebody changes their discount rate, for instance. It can make big
Can't
changes.
you use ERS as a gauge since it's based on shorter term looks at the market and TRS is based on the longer term assessment? So can't you use ERS kind of as a gauge to suspect what we think TRS will do?
Yeah, absolutely. We think that TRS will follow the same trend as ERS in terms of coming down for the TRS.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the external audit report for the 2013-14 fiscal year? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 7-0.
Okay, it is my pleasure. As you know, Ruth mentioned a local assistance plan that Duzine had to create and implement last school year. And here we have Deborah Hogenkamp, who's the Duzine principal, and Michelle Martoni, the assistant superintendent for educational programs, to let us know where we stand with that LAP report and what's happening next.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you our experience as a local assistance plan school. When we were first designated as a local assistance plan school, it was not a very happy event. However, going through the process has proven very positive, and I'm happy to say that we're no longer designated as a local assistance plan school. Last year, Principal Hogenkamp and I presented on the LAP designation, you'll recall that there were 3 criteria by which you could be designated. One is that you have not made annual yearly progress. Another is that there is a widening gap between a subgroup of students and the general education population. And the third criterion is the one by which we were designated, and that is when a subgroup, for us it was our economically disadvantaged subgroup, when the composite score of their math and ELA does not reach a certain standard established by the state.
As we went through the process last year, there were 3 important insights that surfaced. The first one was that we decided to view this as an opportunity, not a misfortune. We also knew that we needed to respect the vast abilities of our teachers, and we decided also to further assist them in improving their skill set. The inclination could be to act out of fear, if you will, and adopt a program such as the modules, but that would cause us to narrow the focus of instruction, and we didn't want to do that. So we basically needed the courage to do what we thought was right for children. And that took us back to our foundational thinking, to our mission and vision that we've been living by here at New Paltz for years. While the LAP identified the economically disadvantaged students, we chose to focus on all of the children who are in need of support. And we also chose to go beyond the Duzine school community, and we shared our knowledge and resources district-wide.
No, that's correct. The heart of the lab process is really the diagnostic self-review. This is a process by which we look at our practices that we engage in, and we looked at them very seriously. For example, we were not content in saying, oh, we do that. We wanted to know to what degree do we do it, how pervasive is a practice, how much do we do it with fidelity. So we were very critical of our practices, and we looked very seriously at them. From that review, from that reflection, we made recommendations for changes in practice, and we will speak more about them later in the presentation.
Our lab committee that consisted of administrators, teachers, and a parent representative worked together quite closely throughout the year on accomplishing a specific plan of action that stemmed from the diagnostic review that we did at BOCES that Michelle just described to you. And we came up with the lab action responsibility chart. Actually, I want to credit Michelle with that. She was very helpful in assisting us in that regard, and she's going to describe that to you.
Simply, we just held the members of the lab committee responsible for the different recommendations that we were putting forth. And I do want to recognize that our lab committee met regularly. We had teachers, administrators, and a parent representative on the committee, and they were very committed to this work. It wasn't really a situation where we had to reach out to people and ask them to be on this committee. Once the designation was known, teachers and parents reached out to us. So in the action responsibilities chart, actually all we did was put down what changes we wanted to make and who would be responsible to make them come to fruition. We now highlight a couple of those that we put forth and how we work through them. One of the things we wanted to make sure, as Principal Hogenkamp said, is that our curriculum, our students were not being subject to a narrowing of curriculum. So we provided staff development to teachers to look at how they were aligning learning to the Common Core. One of the things that we did was look at the standards and see the embedded skills and competencies that were required in these standards, so we teased those out. For many teachers, this was an aha moment, and they were able to understand where they needed to differentiate for students and where students were entering the learning process. The teachers who participated in this then turnkeyed at their building level so that we were able to articulate this across the buildings. We also engaged in data inquiry practices. Not that we were crunching numbers so much, but we were looking at student work and figuring out what concepts were transferred and what concepts were not and why they were not, and then changing the teaching to effect a change in learning.
There were a number of other activities as well. One certainly worth mentioning was a book study that we did across Lenape, Duzine, and the middle school. That title is Teaching with Poverty in Mind by Eric Jensen. And we learned 3 basic tenets in reading that book. One was it helped us understand the nature of poverty. It also helped us understand how poverty affects student behavior and their academic performance, as well as this one, which I think is really key. It helped us understand that being raised in poverty is not a sentence for a substandard life. So the book then took us through these action steps that we could do. The format introduces a topic, it gives you the corresponding research, and then it tells you ways in which you can bring this to life. For example, some of the action steps involved creating a culture of caring, providing early childhood interventions, providing staff development, using data inquiry, and also, again, having an enrichment mindset, not narrowing instruction. We also looked at ways in which we could engage parents and families so that they would be able to fully participate in our school programs and our school community. And that involved things such as translating documents and also purchasing bilingual materials for the classroom. Lastly, I'd like to mention that in those activities, we took a really deep look at the summer school experience. And we found that it would behoove us to have an open house for summer school as well. So we did accomplish that. And more concerning was one of the members of our team taught summer school and conveyed to us that there was a great level of hunger during the summer. And so that precipitated our Food for Thought campaign. And I would just like publicly to say we really appreciate the support of the entire New Paltz community as well as the New Paltz Foundation in making that a huge success. We were able to provide breakfast and a snack every day for every student that attended summer school.
We understand that the journey really has not ended. We know that the practices we have put in place are emerging in many areas, and we will continue to support these practices to their sustainability. And although we are no longer a local assistance plan school, we will continue with a committee, rename the school support plan so that we can make sure that these practices stay in place and become embedded.
The guidance document is prescribed by the state as to what should be included in the basics. This is a building-based, but what they did is expanded it to more of an RTI kind of program as well as an AIS. So it is a support. We're not required to do that, but we're choosing. No, her question is, since you are supporting
guidance plan.
it's not included in this.
Right, in the guidance plan, there's city comprehensive, and it had a lot of great things. It talked about the AIS, it talked about other supports and how the social worker works with the younger students. So I thought that this would, the question is why is all this great work put into
Because this is just coming to a conclusion and then they're starting to do it. Maybe it'll be.
I think it's a really good suggestion. I think we should take a look at that.
for next year? And that will make it more, like, it's more, put it forward.
I like that.
I have a question. I had taken 3 years off from this, as you recall. When did we first get notified that this issue exists and needed to be addressed? What was the time frame?
I was notified in last summer, right before I began working here, and that was about July. And I came up and contacted the state and asked what, how this came about, and I shared with you the criteria, the 3 criteria, the one of which we were designated under. It was interesting because Duzine does not have a state test in Duzine. So the question was how was that designated? And it was based on the 3rd grade test results, and it was back mapping. So the short answer is last July was when the designation occurred.
Had there previously been any means by which to assess whether this need existed? Or is this the first time that this was done, that this was assessed?
There was no way. You really have to understand how the data that they used was back mapping from an old set of criteria. We were moving to the new standards, and they were doing this based on the old standards. There was no way that we would have been able to figure this out on our own, I believe, unless we had done some similar kinds of work and we didn't have the capacity really to do all of that.
I don't think we could have predicted the designation.
What I'm trying to figure out is this the first time that they tried to figure this out, or was it something that
No, it's the first time we were
existed
identified
before?
by state score test scores in 3rd grade to identify the K2 building.
Okay. I mean, the reason I'm asking about that is because, was it 4 years ago, we did, for budgetary reasons, institute a program change in Duzine, which I wasn't comfortable with at the time, but I didn't carry the day with that particular argument.
No.
And I'm just wondering if there could be any.
That would
connection
only
between-
affect 16 students.
It wouldn't
I understand.
affect the, no,
I
I
understand,
don't.
but it's, some of them may have been.
It was not, you have to understand our pre-K program is not based on economics. It's not, Deborah can explain a little bit about that.
No, I
It's not the
remember this
same
program well.
population.
It's not, I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not challenging you on that basis. That's all, just exploring.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious if you can give an example of the staff development that was done, just.
Well, the book study was one.
Do you want to speak to the book study? Was there another one
Other than
besides one? I'm just curious.
Yes.
We provided staff development on unpacking the Common Core standards and making sure that the approach to unpacking those standards was not a narrow approach. We are not adopting the modules, and we don't want our students to be pigeonholed into a lockstep, skills-based type of curriculum. And so that was one of the professional developments that was provided. No, I provided that professional development here in Duzine, Lenape, and the middle school.
I'm just curious, yeah. Great.
Just to give you a heads up, we're picking up more and more of our own staff development or getting outside groups because our philosophy and what's being presented to us through BOCES seems to be going in two different directions. They're adopting these modules which do not necessarily put learning at the center. And we don't want, and this was a decision even our teachers made. We tried to participate in the math initiative. And what we before we went in, we said we don't want to blindly be adopting state ed modules. We want to make sure that the initiative is actually an innovative, constructivist approach. And unfortunately, it didn't go in that direction. And it might be perfect for other districts. It just doesn't comply with what we believe in. So what's been happening is Michelle has been doing a lot of the staff development herself, or working with a cadre of teachers who have been turnkey training, and bringing in some professionals in different areas that are key in their field, but have the same philosophy of teaching and learning as we do.
I just want to mention that I did have a conversation with the director of curriculum and instruction at BOCES to the effect that when we were sending teachers to training for unpacking the Common Core standards, it was always through the lens of the modules, which I said wasn't working for us because that was forcing then the adoption of the modules. We were allowed to align, we were allowed to adapt or adopt, and if you unpack them through the modules, then you're really forcing adoption. I didn't really get a response to that, and so that's why we took the initiative to do, as Deb said, we follow our mission and vision, and so we started to do in-house professional development.
And we also feel very strongly that still on the books, curriculum and instruction is a local decision. And so we don't want to blindly adopt what the state is. We do not want to blindly adopt.
No, the part before that.
Local decision. It's our decision. And we have a strong core intelligence and vision and mission that guides the decisions that happen in our classrooms. So we didn't want to give that up to become one of everybody else.
Thank you very much.
At the last board meeting, we had some questions about modified sports and cutting students from modified sports. And I didn't have the answers, and I thought, like the rest of the board members, that modified sports was more of an all-inclusive and that there would be no cuts to it. Since then, I have learned the huge difference between a modified program and an intramural sports program. President Kenoyer thought it was a good idea because Tony was explaining it to us, but that it might be better if she could explain it to us in a public meeting since the questions came up, so that we would be able to have a clear understanding of the difference between interscholastic modified programs, and intramurals. So I'd like to introduce our Director of Athletics, as well as Phys Ed, Health Services, and turn it over to Tony Woody.
Okay. In looking for a definition for interscholastic sports, as it applies to modified and actually all of our interscholastic sports, the Commissioner's Regulations 135.1, which is the Phys Ed regulations, actually provided us with definitions for both modified sports or interscholastic activity, which basically means interschool activities through which provide competition between representatives of 2 or more schools, and which offer enriched opportunities for the selected and more highly skilled individuals. That's what the Commissioner has determined as interscholastic sports. He's also determined that intramurals means activities within a school, a single school district, involving only those pupils enrolled there, so that we would not travel other places to compete against anybody. And they're designed to serve everybody within that group or that building. Everything on the left side of the screen there, everything under interscholastic sports, was taken directly out of New York State Public High School Athletic Association handbook, but most of what is there is actually dictated by Commissioner's regulations. Modified sports is actually open for grades 7 and 8 in our case, although we are now facing with the decline of enrollment in the area that some of the local schools will have modified sports that will include 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. That is not something that we will be part of as long as we have no 9th graders on those teams. Intramurals, on the other hand, could be a whole population of a school, and in this case it would be the middle school. It could be 6 through 8. Commissioner's regs and interscholastic athletics do not provide any competitive activities for 6th graders. The Commissioner's regs also cover a pile of things like how long the competitions can be, how long practice sessions are, and if you look there, practice sessions must be designed to provide instruction and practice in physical skills, activities, etc., team play, designed around that sport. Intramurals has no requirements for practice, has no requirements for instruction. Intramural programs that I have known provide very limited instruction. They provide an opportunity for kids to play, but no real hard instruction. Often they follow whatever's happening in the phys ed class, but are not necessarily limited to what we know as sports or school sports. Interscholastic sports are limited to the things that we have here, and know as that. Intramurals could be kickball. There's no interscholastic kickball. Although it could also be volleyball, which could fall on either side. The bottom left, the little purple there on the screen, just so you know, because it's like, well, why can't we have a little bit of both, or why can't these guys play those teams? New York State forbids interscholastic athletes on a team to compete against club athletes. So intramurals technically falls under club, and we did, I think the last club that we had was here at the high school for intramurals, and that was a long time ago, and it sort of died by attrition because nobody attended it. I do not know when the last time was that we had intramurals at the middle school, but it was probably 17 years, 18 years ago. So it's been a long time ago. In looking through this, you might or might not be interested to know that New Paltz has been involved in interscholastic activities competitively since at least 1933. That was the earliest yearbook I could dig out. We've been involved in modified sports since 1966, which first modified interscholastic basketball team. That was as per a former athletic director who strolled through the building this morning, so I asked him. Modified football came around about 1970, and we really went on the record in the early 80s. That was the earliest that I could find details that we had joined the New York State Public High School modified sports programs. New York State, the Commissioner's Regs, along with the Public High School Athletic Association, as I said, they have a standard for everything, and everything has a standard, and most of those standards are set in safety. They prescribe everything for modified athletics. How long, time between contests, how many practice days, how many days in a row you can compete, night's rest. Those are some of the bullets on the left-hand side there that go over all kinds of the regulations that go into modified sports. Intramurals has no defined seasons, could be any activity that an advisor chooses, could be for any length of time, could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months, could be every other day. Interscholastic sports, we practice every day. There's prescribed regulations for practicing, how much time a practice can be, what should be in practice. Intramurals doesn't really have any of those regulations, so it would be open to whoever the advisor or advisors would be or what they would like to be doing. Interscholastic sports requires students to have health exams. Very interesting what we discover when we have health exams. So we have approximately 500, give or take, athletes, individuals each year, which means 500 of our students get health exams. You don't have to have that for intramurals. There are safety concerns on the left for interscholastic modified sports. Obviously, for intramurals, we'd have some of the same concerns, but not near the requirements that modified sports would. The advisor could be just about anybody, bounded by an employee of a school district. On the left, on the whole bottom, is what a coach must do in order to be qualified to obtain a coaching license. Our coaches all must have a coaching license unless they're a certified teacher. They still are required to have all of those things, and our phys ed teachers are required to have most of those things because part of their curriculum in school, in college, covered all of these things. So we have all kinds of regulations for modified sports that are prescribed, and if we step outside of them, there are consequences, but they are designed with safety and fairness in mind. Intramurals kind of open; they don't have any kind of guidance or guidelines. It would be what we would make it. Modified interscholastic sports, I know it says 20 years up there, but since I'm 21 years old, I know they've been around for longer than that. And again, over those 20 years, modified sports continues to change. Came from an athletic director's meeting this morning, and the representative to the New York State Modified Committee spoke for a good 30 minutes on all of the changes and all of the changes that come through for modified sports. Again, are aimed at safety, fair play, openness, making sure that things are modified to the modified sports. There are plenty of modifications to the play of modified sports. And that bottom grid there Modified sports has an AB structure, which allows us to keep many more athletes on our teams than would be possible on a JV or varsity team. We are not lucky enough here to have an enormous number of coaches. Most of our programs have a single coach at the helm, so having an enormous number of students is very difficult. However, New York State has modified athletics so that we have an AB structure, and at the middle school level, the AB structure allows us to keep extra players because we play extra time. And each one of those players under this structure is guaranteed a little bit, is guaranteed playing time. The right-hand side, intramurals, again, is modified by whatever the group is in attendance that day. Teams generally change on and off. Obviously, an interscholastic team does not change generally after the team is set. And many of our modified teams, just so you know, have open enrollment. Not all teams need to have some boundaries on the number of players. Our intramurals are restricted basically by the same factors that restrict how many modified players we can have. Big one is safe space, or how many students can we fit in our facility. When you look at the middle school facilities, you're well aware of the fact that we have one soccer field over there, and we play 2 soccer teams on it, and they split it. If we had intramurals, we'd still only have one field. So the limiting factors are the same. Funding for coaches, funding for competitions, funding for equipment, amount of equipment. We're also bound by the safe environment. How many students can we fit in a space? How safe can we make the activity depending upon the equipment that's used? And how safe are those students with varying abilities? I can tell you that once upon a time, I coached a modified softball team, and I had a few girls who could not catch a ball. And it was very scary to think that I was going to have to put them out on the field because I was afraid that somebody would actually hit them the ball and they would be hurt. And that happens a lot with our fledgling athletes. So when a team is picked, we consider safety and then all of these other limiting factors. For intramurals, there would be, the limiting factors would again be the same. We need a safe environment. We need facilities. We don't have a lot of fields at the middle school. We don't have a lot of space in the gyms. So again, the things that would limit how many kids could be in the gym for an intramural program are the same things that limit the number of students on a modified sports team. Hold on, sorry, Rick. The bottom green box, just so nobody is surprised, that came out of our athletic handbook. It's been in the handbook since long before the amount of time that I've been here. And it basically says the same thing, that we're going to keep as many students as we possibly can on the team based on the limiting criteria. Availability of financial resources, qualified coaches, safety, suitable facilities. That has been in our handbook, in the athletic handbook, since long before I was there. So people know that coming in when they come to a team, that there's a possibility of being cut. That said, our coaches, looking at all of these things, try to keep as many players as is humanly possible. We won't cut one player, we won't cut 2 players. That's just not it, right? They don't do that. They keep as many players as possible, try to figure out what our middle ground is there on that chart. Can we fit them all in the place? If it's a game like basketball or volleyball, you can only put 5 or 6 kids on the court at any given time. We encourage the players that don't make a team to continue to work on their skills. I think you have the rubrics that we use. That was the soccer one. For each sport, there are different variations of the same theme. So we know what skills are or are not an athlete doesn't have or does have. So the coach can encourage them to continue to work on those skills. That doesn't mean if you don't make the team as a 7th grader, you can't come back as an 8th grader. Doesn't mean that if you don't make either the modified years, you can't come back as a 9th grader. You all know Michael Jordan was cut from his basketball team. So it doesn't preclude that. It just, sometimes it's just a function of physical maturity. There's a young lady at Lenape yesterday. It was about this big. She was playing with 2 girls in the 5th grade who are my size. Not that I'm the biggest person in the world, but I'm a fairly sizable 5th grader at this point. And she was working her hardest. And you know, in 2 years, she's gonna be taller than I am, right? Sometimes it's just a physical maturity thing. Anyway, the students that don't make certain teams are encouraged to join other teams. And we often have other programs where they can go and become a member of the team almost immediately, because they may start over here and wind up on that team, discover that they like some other things. All right, last little bit. Interscholastic modified sports. This is a framework for interscholastic athletics on the left. Came from the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. These are the things that we hope that our students come through athletics with. Basically, interscholastic modified sports are organized, meaningful competition with an educational basis. Intramurals doesn't have that support, doesn't have that backing, doesn't have that, for the most part, that enforcement. It's play, and it's an opportunity for students to be physically active. And I hope that sort of gives you a little bit of difference between the 2 activities.
That was a really long but interesting comparison that would let us understand why 10 or 11 students were cut from the modified soccer team.
But I actually don't understand why it was not so I would like to know.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you speak into this?
It was a discussion of the difference between intramural and modified. But I'm still trying to get a sense of why we had to make that many cuts on modified soccer.
The limiting factors I spoke about. Safety.
What in particular was the limiting factor that was what was how many students?
11 students. There are 11 students on a soccer team, on the competitive soccer field. There were 35 athletes that tried out. I have 1 coach. I have half a soccer field. We have 1 coach. We have half a soccer field to practice on. Because
How many students made the team?
24 students made the team, which is 2 plus full soccer teams. Because of the AB structure, all of those students will have an opportunity to play either the 1st and 3rd period or the 2nd and 4th period. And as long as we have over, I believe, 20, I don't know what the number is, we can play a 5th period in which all of those students may have an opportunity to cycle through the 5th period of time. So all 24 of those athletes have an opportunity to be on the field.
So, to go back to Ruth's question, then what you're saying is we don't have an opportunity to have a C team. You have an A, B, and 11 would constitute a whole nother team.
A whole nother team. Okay. We're
Okay, that's.
mhm.
I guess I'm just looking at the chart that you provided, and it said, minimum required is for the 4 quarters and players 15.
That's
For soccer?
for the minimum required for 4-quarter extended play is 15. That would be 4 18-minute periods, as opposed to the 5, because we have more than that. We are able to play 5 15-minute periods, so we actually have more time on the field.
Well, maybe I can jump in here. Trying to figure out two things. First of all, you could never field a team with 11 people because, there's going to be substitution. Nobody's going to stay in for the duration of the game. You have to be able to have people on the field if there's an injury or an accident, and so they give you a 15 minimum. 15 minimum on the team in order to have 11 on the field in the course of the competition. We had a situation we were discussing where one level of play was being canceled because of lack of enough manpower. It's the wrong word. Enough participants. In order to keep those two levels completely filled at their minimum levels, and yet we cut 11 people from the lower program, which appeared to be overpopulated, rather than promoting some of the better players to JV and keeping
Promoting, you can't just automatically promote an athlete from modified to JV. There's a selection classification process, which many of you continue to hear a lot about. It's a state requirement mandated process that students must go through that includes a maturity test, maturity factor, as well as a physical fitness test. It is not an option. If you were one of those 11 students whose rubric scores did not make whatever the cut score was, there is no way to selectively classify up. The students at the top of that pile had an option to do that, but I cannot fill a JV team. I must have 11 high school students to have a JV team.
That's district policy.
No, that's actually state mandated.
We also have a policy that says that we can't move children up from modified to JV just to fill the team.
Exactly.
Correct. Well, that's actually state policy, so.
That's what that was the question.
Are there different criteria to move a modified player from, or a player from modified to JV versus varsity?
Yes. And you said.
So I think what we've discussed in the past regarding policy is moving a student from modified to varsity. And it seems like this is a different situation.
No, it's the selection classification process is.
So there is a process, there is a state process.
There is a state process,
so
but.
Modified players could play on JV.
Yes, but only after we've successfully fielded a JV team from the age-appropriate group.
And we did not have 11.
We did not have 11.
It was the age. That's
Right,
really what
correct.
I think that's all I was trying to
Correct,
clarify.
yes, yeah, there's modified, which is just modified athletes are age-appropriate at middle school, and JV and varsity athletes under the state, the commissioner's regs are age-appropriate high school, 9-12, okay? So when you can't cross the two over, you have to make a team here at the high school before you can add some of the better players from the middle school. So
if you do have it, they can move up if they pass the maturity test
Correct.
from the state and they're skill-wise and they
Correct.
fielded the team. So because I know
Correct.
we've had movement from
Mhm.
8th grade to 9th grade.
yes, we actually had one young man who chose to try to test up before we dissolved the JV team, and we only had one of all of those middle school athletes, because it's open for all of those middle school athletes, all of the 8th graders that are playing. Okay, all of the 8th graders. We had one young man who chose to try to test up.
Well, what we
Okay,
discussed at this table last year is that a modified aged kid cannot play on varsity. That is our district
correct.
policy.
That's district policy.
So that's different.
That's different. Yeah, Modified sports has nothing to do with selection classification. It gets a little muddy when you try to think that you're going to fill a varsity team or a JV team with middle school athletes, because you can't just go and say, okay, these 6 played last year at modified, so they can automatically move up. You can't do that. You have to do the whole process.
But that's what they wanted to understand, because we were trying to figure out, is there a way to have those 11 students that were cut from the program have some kind of an opportunity to be able to be on the team? So the board had mentioned a variety of things.
And, just from my perspective, modified sports is an incredible opportunity to get athletes and to get them to, it's all here. It's to get them to play, to get them to learn, and to improve them. So that, and the only way to do that is to get them to be able to play. So what can we change, or what can happen that would have prevented something like this? Is this was just a bigger year than we've ever had?
This was a much bigger year for soccer. As you can tell, we have no JV team because we did not have players, and there are a couple of things that happen. You heard the guidance counselors talk about the transition year. We can have, I'm going to make it up because I don't know how many 8th graders. We can have 10 8th graders playing on the modified team. They go like this to the high school, and all of these other opportunities open up for them. And all of a sudden, over here, they can come here into this room and they can play the piano every afternoon, which is really what they want to do. They didn't have that opportunity at the middle school, and I'm making this up because I don't know, maybe they do. And then they do, and they have all of these other opportunities. And soccer was okay because I was playing with my friends and it was okay, but that wasn't the passion.
So the lower grade, so the modified level. Is it unusual to have that many kids cut in a year? 11 seems high.
No, because you heard from that set of parents. We have had anywhere, depending on the team. I'm not going to look at last year because I don't know what's going to happen the rest of this year. Modified boys basketball cut last year. We had 42 young men go out for the team. He kept, I want to say, 15 or 18. We have half a gym. Okay, we have half a gym, and we have one coach. Yes, there are ways. Build me another gym. Build another gym. Build some more fields. No, that's how some place. I mean, that's how people do it. I just want you to know.
Can I ask one question before you go on? I'm not sure, but do you know if there was a large proportion of 6th graders who went out for soccer? Because this is one of the largest 6th grade classes that we've had in that building in a very long time.
It would have been last year's 6th grade, and I believe a large proportion of them were 7th graders.
Oh, all right. No, I'm talking about incoming. So this is just 7th and 8th.
Yeah, this is just 7th and 8th grade.
All right. I get my question.
I just again, coaches don't like to cut, but again, the limiting factors are facilities. It's the same way you would limit we look at our class sizes. You can only get so many kids in a classroom. The teacher can only attend to so many. And then we have this flying factor where things fly around, and there's a safety factor as well. You come and watch our modified volleyball team. She had 35 girls go out for the volleyball team. She kept 15. Can only put 6 girls on the court at any given time. Fortunately, the A-B structure works, but if you come in half of the gym, wear your hard hat because balls are flying all over. So.
Last question is, when kids try out, is it known how many kids total can be in a team at any given time?
There's no magic number. Everybody every year asks for a magic number, and there's no magic number because if I tell you the magic number is 24 for soccer, and we have 25 kids go out, we would never cut that extra kid, but we would have to if we said we have to have it.
Well, why don't you use a range? You could have between 20 and 25 or something.
Because we still have, it does fluctuate back and forth. You can't do that.
Do the kids
You
know
can't do
when
that.
they try out at the modified level, there is a significant chance they're not
Yes.
going to make the team?
Yes, they do. That's one of the very first things that all of the modified coaches say to the students. Here's what's going to happen and here's how it's going to work. The next 3 days we're going to work on these skills, and the next 3 days you're going to be showing your skills. And in this case, because we had so many athletes out, I sent the varsity coach and the JV coach along with the modified coach and the girls modified coach to watch these players, because no one person can see all of that. So there were 4 coaches on site that looked at all of these children. Again, nobody wants to cut anybody, but we're bound by safety, ability to play, number of people that we could put on a court or on a field, our fields, and our equipment sometimes. So
I'm just looking at the diagram, and I think this is the soccer field, is that?
yeah, that's our side. The last page, yes, that is our soccer field.
So the girls modified has one half, and the boys have the other half, and they practice at the same time.
Right.
2 coaches on the field, and approximately 30 kids. Total, 50? 50?
About 50. I believe there's 24 girls. Okay, so that's what we have for. We have 50 students playing here safely, tight, successfully. Fortunately, the coaches, you don't play soccer on half the field, and the coaches have figured it out. You go over there, and the girls are using the whole field, and the boys are over there doing something else, and then the boys come back, and the coaches work it out. But that's all we have.
And it's pretty standard in the area schools that there are cuts to their modified.
There are. I checked today.
Check that out too after the thing.
I checked. I actually had my athletic director's meeting this morning. There were 14 schools in the room. One of them is Coleman. They don't have a modified program because they don't have the junior high. Everybody cuts using the same, for the most part, the exact same criteria that we do. Number of students that can play on the court, safety, facilities, equipment, and it's all that everybody does the same thing. Even the smallest schools today said the exact same thing. The schools that you would think, there's not so many kids they wouldn't have to cut. They don't offer the same amount of programs we do, so everybody funnels into one. The one school has has basketball in the winter, so they have a population of a couple hundred trying to funnel into one team.
I'm curious what the sports you mentioned that have open enrollment there.
Cross country, they're individual sports. Team sports are generally the ones, because there's a definite amount of people that are allowed to play on the field or the court. Cross country, swimming, football, gymnastics, wrestling, track and field are generally not cut. We have some bounded sports. Golf is bounded. We try to get as many athletes out there, but only 6 can be on a competitive team. Girls, it's only 4. We're bounded by the fact that we don't own our own golf. I guess we're building a golf course. We don't have our own golf course,
No golf courses and no pools, so don't advance.
Wow. Tennis. I mean, we have this wonderful thing. We actually have 6 courts, so he keeps extra, but only 7 girls can play. Only 7 boys can play on the competitive scoring.
So it seems like the easier question for the shorter list is what teams do we cuts to?
Team sports.
So it's basketball?
The soccer's, volleyball, softball, baseball. Well, pretty much everything with football, but the construct for football is you can have an offensive line and a defensive line and special teams. The construct of the sport is different. You can't do that with a volleyball team. So
It seems pretty obvious why there were cuts. I mean, it's all here. So are there any creative ways to get around? Like what can we do?
space. Space. If we went to an all intramural program and we wanted to play volleyball, we'd still need space, because if 30 kids from each of the grades signed up, we'd have 90 athletes, 90 players who want to play volleyball. You still couldn't get them all in the gym in the hour and change that we would have after school for space, equipment, coaches.
So I'm curious, you said we used to have an intramural program. I'm assuming it was when there was 5th through 8th grade in the middle school?
I haven't, honestly, it could have been,
The facilities were the same back
but
then.
our population was less,
But
and
if we're
these,
only keeping 15
and these,
kids on a team, I'm just curious how it was done.
I don't know, but I can tell you that the sports program as it stands now is the same as when I came almost 20 years ago with the same teams. We have more hits. Before that, I want to say there probably were not as many athletic teams, and that's, again, over 20, almost 20 years ago. So that's my guess, because if you do look through some of the old yearbooks, and I actually brought the 1933 yearbook.
Actually, we know for a fact
So-
that we have more teams, because I've
Oh,
been here and we've even added lacrosse, so I know that we have more sports.
Varsity JV, the modified, modified we haven't added to.
Which we should be adding.
If we,
We can't afford it, but we should. We don't have a feeder program into some of our other.
no, we don't. We don't have, well, fortunately, nobody else has modified tennis either. And if Julia were here, she'd tell you that our tennis team is awesome. They really are. She really is. She's a great player. We're all about all. When I say all, if you were to go to Wallkill, you were going to Rhinebeck, Red Hook, Weebatuck, and I don't know if any of you have ever been to Armenia, but we're all in the same boat. We have this much space, this many coaches, and all of these kids that want to play. And because Modified is a program for as many kids as we can get.
Sure.
But
I totally get it. Like I said, the reasons we do it are obvious. They're right here. I just still think, I went to school, the middle school, we had intramurals, we had an extra grade there. I can't, with a whole extra grade, how much different are the numbers between the 5th or 8th grade population and the 6th, we lost a whole grade. So is there still that many? I mean, I don't know. Are there that many more kids now? We have another gym at the high school that wasn't there.
Oh, the gym at the high school.
I graduated in '92, so I was at the middle school like '84 to '80.
Just so you know, the gym at the high school houses modified volleyball because I needed to do some equipment repair at the middle school, and I obviously cannot do that. So the gym here is now full with modified volleyball players, and then in the winter it will be filled with modified wrestlers for similar reasons.
I hope you understand asking these questions not to give you a hard time, but I think it highlights what with the upcoming.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, these are things that superintendent and I speak about, about all the time. And we, like I said, we try to get as many kids out there as we can. We really do. But I want your players to be safe as well.
I also question, is there a possibility, since it's 6th grade, they can't be in the modified program, could we have an intramural program and, offer it to like 6, 7, because you can do that 6, 8, and have a second, so we don't have, number one, the finances to be able to do that. And she's clearly explained there's absolutely no physical space to house that. So as much as the desire is to be totally inclusive and offer these programs and fill those gaps, we don't have the capacity in both facilities or coaching or advisors if it were an intramural sport. And right now we just gonna have to wait.
I have one more thing I'd like to ask about this. I'm sorry. It's actually not a technical matter. Do we have a system? I'm actually pleased that this happened. Okay, I've learned something tonight. But nobody's here, and we don't even have our newspaper reporters here anymore. And this is something that's on the mind of parents. You see these kind of questions, where we see them, they pop up on Facebook. It's a whole new world. Every parent vents their particular concern in a forum that's not a place where they can get the answer to their question. And then they're all trying to figure out why the 7 of us aren't coming into the conversation to explain to them. And here's a case where obviously we don't know the answer. We're depending on our administrators and coaches to explain this stuff. how can we get this to the parents? What exactly transpired tonight, since we can assume about 3 people might watch the television broadcast and still be watching after 2 hours. And not you, I mean, the meeting's been being broadcast since 7. We don't have any newspaper reporters here, so I'm
Actually,
assuming hardly anyone.
it isn't being broadcast at all.
I mean, on the
We're not
playback.
live.
I'm saying on the playback. No one's still gonna be watching 2 hours of it. How can we create a communication system, especially since we don't send out regular newsletters like we did back for the budget crisis, to convey what transpired here tonight to the parents that have been seeking this information? Is there a paper we can get together that we can throw on the Budget Watch page? Can you provide us with some text so we can get this to the parents?
You know,
You put it on the website. I want to be able
As
to.
you're saying this, I'm thinking there's a possibility of cutting her presentation and the conversation. Because Nick's taught me that sometimes the conversation is sometimes better, not better than your presentation.
No, you're right, it is.
But that maybe we can have Keith cut this
Yeah.
section.
That really great green box that you had, explained everything right in there.
That great green box is on page 2 of my athletic handbook.
Yeah, but not everybody's
That's
got the
not-
athletic.
No, I understand that,
That's not
but
what they're saying.
I understand that, but that's fine, that I can send you, that's easy.
Well, we'll have to see what we can do. Right now, we're
section-
inundated in this capital project
Right,
stuff
the
that
truth
it's
is,
really.
that section in that box didn't completely work for me until we went through the Q&A just now, where you
Exactly.
explained that, yeah, the boys and girls on the same, like, that's the part everyone needs to hear, not the box.
That's why I'm thinking a little video
So-
piece with some of this other stuff, if we can figure that out.
Or these labeled girls, JV, how many girls are on that section?
Yeah,
how
but
many
until
boys
it's
are-
physically explained.
Exactly.
Nobody's
Yeah.
got
Right, it's,
Yeah, I didn't understand anything until the Q&A.
Me too, so I think,
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that
We'll
may not
figure-
get
we'll
solved
think
tonight,
about
but as long as we can work on it. So,
I agree.
I have, anybody is welcome to call my office anytime. I've answered the same questions you've all asked here countless times, and it's because the coaches do go through this with the athletes at the front. The coaches go through this when they have a parent meeting. That nobody, it's like nobody reads the page until it happens to their child.
I
So
don't,
if
I
you'd
don't
like
mean
go
to
back.
interrupt, but
Sure.
I've been here, this is my 10th year, and I still didn't understand it. And it's been explained to me, but in different ways. And I have to tell you, we all sat here, and even I couldn't understand why we would cut kids from a modified program. So it's something, I think Steve and every member of the board sitting here, it's serious. It's not just for the parents of the children who may have been cut, because the person who brought it to my attention, their child made it. So it's very important because it gets to the hub of what we're all about, which are children, and not disenfranchising children, because this could very well do that. So they need to know why. We have to come up with some simplistic way to do that. And I think in a week or two, we might be able to sit down with Holly, explain what we need to do, and figure out a real communications-friendly way to explain this so that people really can understand it. And because the pictures, when I saw, I looked at the field space, until you explained it, I didn't know why you gave it to me.
Right.
So I think that it's too important to let go by. So if the district clerk would just make sure that we note that we're going to revisit this and try and get some communications out, because you're going to be key to helping us get to that. So thank you.
I would suggest extracting the information from the Q&A as it's talking.
Okay, I wish you said it into there, but did you get that? Because that was a really good idea. Talking about this.
Since that's where most of it all came out.
Exactly. Good job, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do our capital project discussion.
No, I saw that.
So, Okay, so, on last Wednesday night, we had the capital project forum here at the high school. It was an open forum where we did the presentation on the capital project and a question and answer session for the public. So just thought we should briefly discuss that and some of the questions that were raised. One of the things that we want to stress is that the project, the cost of this project is $52.9 million, and it should be understood by the public that that is a hard number. We cannot go over that amount. And also, the district will receive approximately 50% aid on the cost of the project. So the cost to the taxpayer, we're estimating at about $26.4 million, also minus the $700,000 from the capital fund. So, does anybody have anything that they want to add to the discussion? Any questions or comments about the questions that we heard from the public?
I wasn't there for it, unfortunately, but I think we got some feedback
From Kathy Sanchez, yes.
Right, so how are we going to incorporate anything moving forward?
The feedback I understood was that the presentation lacked clarity. Unfortunately, I'm not sure in that discussion what they were looking for clarification, because they didn't provide what they were missing. So I'm not sure how we move forward with answering that one. If they would ask some questions, certainly we would respond. We've asked many, many times in these presentations for people to come out and ask questions, and we try to, get them the answers so that they are informed what's going on, so they can make an informed decision. But I'm not sure if that was the feedback we were looking for, because I don't know how to restructure a presentation, or for any of us to structure our presentations as we're talking to the community, if we don't know what they weren't clear about.
Yeah. And I think that he used, the person who had written whatever that was, mentioned the students asking a question about the aid and what would happen with that money. Well, I think it was very clearly explained, and the student understood it, and I know that because she went back to the high school, she's talked to Mrs. Clinton. We heard from Julia, they're having these conversations in the participation in government group, and they're asking questions of each other, and they're hoping, Mrs. Clinton, that maybe one of the board members or someone could come in and have a conversation with them and do a presentation.
And actually, I would even take one step further. I'd like to have the feedback from them.
Well, they want the presentation first, and then give us the feedback. That was what was, you weren't there, so this is what we talked about. But I think that they talked about infrastructure. I think the confusion is that we don't borrow all the money until we need it. So if we don't use all the money, we don't borrow it. And what we do is we borrow what we need, and then the state gives us our aid on an ongoing basis for the 50%. Am I correct, Rick? I think that's a point that we have to stress. And then I think the other comment had to do with infrastructure, exactly what. And I don't know how you could have been more clear, because you and Mike and everybody else was there answering questions about all these different parts of our middle school especially that needed attention. And we do have a tour coming up, and people can actually see most of it. Not everything, there's roof things and like that. We'll have more pictures to show you the things that they can't actually see.
A comment in there that struck me said that we seemed confused.
Oh,
I wasn't sure
That we seemed confused?
Yeah, that we seemed confused. The people at the table didn't seem like they were on the same page with each other with regards to the answers.
That is not the feedback I got from others.
Well, I'm just.
And we had several people come up afterward and thank us and even say, I really liked how you did such and such, but you should stress, for example, what the president just stressed is the aid and the amount and
the money piece.
I think that's really great feedback.
Right,
Yeah.
but you always have to go to, okay, so we got great feedback, we obviously did a good job of reaching the majority of people, but there are gonna be people that we're not gonna reach, and we have to figure out, how did we miss that message, and how can we do better?
Right.
So
Right.
even
And
though we
that
got.
was my comment initially, if I knew what was missed, we could figure out what to do better.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Nick's done a really nice job, and the other folks who've presented have done a nice job of describing what's involved in this project. And, you know, you look at the calendar, and we have several upcoming events, PTA meetings, other presentations, and so folks are encouraged to show up and ask tougher questions, and we'll do our best to answer them.
So the other question that came up was that they tried to put it on the blog, or they tried to get their comment up on the blog, and they couldn't, so it's.
I don't think do we have a blog?
We do have a blog. It's still the same 3 questions from way back, way before we made a decision. on this project.
Because most of the input that we're getting is coming in on that other thing that I mentioned, which was there's an email address that people are emailing information to, and we're trying to respond.
So if we still have a
So
blog, maybe we need to disable that blog if that's.
I thought that we had.
Any question? We're receiving emails from the community?
No, but that's what
Oh,
we have
oh,
open.
Okay.
We have that open, we haven't seen it.
Okay.
There's an email address, no one's, we are sending out emails.
Okay, that's fine.
And anybody who signs the sheet that was put over there, we're sending out emails email blasts talking about different pieces and that piece of information, and anything changes.
If anything does come in on that email address, I assume it will be copied.
Yes, and the superintendent too, because I haven't seen the thing. I want to go back to what Tim said, if you don't mind. I just want to mention these meetings. There's a presentation that Mrs. Clinton and I will be doing to the high school PTSA on Monday, October 6th, and that's at 7 o'clock in the high school library. There's a tour at 6 o'clock, followed by an open forum, a presentation and open forum at the middle school, and that open forum part starts at 6:30, and that's in the middle school gymatorium. But if you get there at 6 o'clock, the students will take you through the school and show you. Oh, the tour starts at 6:30. I apologize. Both times aren't in here, so 6:30, and then it will go to 7 o'clock. And 7 o'clock would be the presentation in the open forum then. And I know that the students are meeting, they're coming up with cards, they're looking at different stations, they're even adding pictures of places you can't see so that they can explain those infrastructure pieces. Then there's a presentation to the Duzine Lenape PTA at 6:30 in the Lenape Library on October 14th. There's a presentation to the town of Esopus, confirmed I believe, on October 16th at 7:30 in the town hall in Esopus. There's a middle school PTA presentation on Tuesday, October 21st at 6 o'clock in the middle school library. And there's a facilities committee meeting, which is actually a presentation and open forum, which includes the board and the community members of the facilities committee, as well as staff members of the facilities committee. That's at 6 o'clock in the district office conference room. And that would be, to review it would be the last open presentation before the capital project vote, which is Tuesday, October 28th in the high school from noon till 9 p.m. And Rick has a note.
You mentioned the middle school tour and the time of that, but you forgot to mention the date for that.
I'm sorry. October 8th.
And just as a point, every single one of those meetings that we mentioned, even though there's maybe to a select group, they're open to everyone.
Only mention those that are open to everyone. I'm sorry, Tim.
So the question I had is, I think Rick could help us in terms of the process and the time frame. So in the spring, we looked at a master plan, we approved a master plan, then we approved a project, and after that, we looked at that project and we kicked out a few items, and I think we even added a couple of items. So that's how we came up with this bond referendum that we're going to be voting on. But I would be interested in hearing from Rick in terms of how much we've communicated already with state ed, And the process for once we have, fingers crossed, an approved referendum, then what exactly is discussed with state ed and how are things moved forward and what type of communications are involved between our district and state ed. And I think that would be how it happens, the time frame, and how that all shakes out in terms of this state aid piece that we believe very strongly will be approximately 50%.
I think that's a great question because I think there's a misconception about that. So if Rick could address that
Okay.
question.
Sure. This cord doesn't go very far. The project itself will go 3 to 4 years for completion. Even though it is voted on as one project, it actually will be submitted to state ed as numerous projects. For instance, as a minimum, state ed requires a separate project for every building. So there'll be at least 4 projects. But that being said, it will probably actually be more than that. Because one of the things that we're working with the construction manager and the architects after this passes is, for instance, are there some couple small things that we can get submitted to state ed quickly, get approved, and done even as early as this coming summer? For instance, maybe let it be gym wall. There will be other things that will be submitted to state ed later for the next phase, which might be things that happen sometime between the 2 summers. And that whole plan of exactly how it's submitted will determine, exactly when the borrowing happens, because basically there's no sense in borrowing the money until you need it, because you have to pay interest on it. And it will also determine when it's broken up into parts. Each part, when it's done, has something called a final cost report for that part of the project. Once that's submitted, that sets your timetable when the state aid comes in. So it's a fairly complicated, but not so complicated pattern of when it goes in. It will really depend on conversations with the architects, construction managers, and what seems to make sense and work out, and also to not disrupt the students, to make that as minimal as possible. As far as the actual impact on the taxpayers, the 1% or the $20 per 100,000 will happen in 2015-16. That I can phase in regardless of the other part. There will be then no further increase. The phasing in will happen as we submit these projects now, but there will be a 1% additional increase or $20 per 100,000 in the 2015-16. That's 1% above whatever the budget is. So if the budget's 2%, it'd be 3%. That's allowed by the cap because capital projects are exempt from the cap. And then that will be in the budget, and there will be no further increases.
Okay, so 2 questions. One question that we've gotten before is there any way for state education department to tell us how much state aid, because we're eligible for 60%, but we're estimating it at 50% because some of the project is not aidable. Can they estimate before we go and tell us approximately how much our state aid would be?
No, until they see actual plans in that from the architects, there is no way for them to estimate because they have nothing to estimate on. They have to see the actual plans and meetings with the architects and construction managers before they can even start to do that.
Okay, you just said that there would be this one-time charge, or the 1% would be between the 2015 and 16 school year.
Correct.
But if you're not borrowing the money till you need it, why am I paying the 1% up front?
The main reason, and it's not the only way, there are literally infinite number of ways of doing it. That is the way that minimizes the impact on the taxpayer. If you delay that another year and take the retiring debt that's supposed to offset that, then what you'll mean is you won't have the 1% 15, 16, but it might be 2 or 3 in future years. So that's the way to minimize it, is to hit it in 15, 16 and be done with it.
Like pre-buying and all that.
Yes, but there's not the only way to do it.
That's a good.
That is just the way to minimize it.
I'm just, not just because I'm a taxpayer,
Oh, yeah.
but also because
Good
that's
question.
the questions that I'm getting. And I think that they
Yes.
need to be answered, and this is the forum. That's why we're having this
Oh, yeah,
conversation.
no, it's a good question. That just minimizes, there are literally infinite number of different financing plans. That's the one that minimizes the impact on the taxpayer.
Well, I want to turn it back to Tim.
So I think we can emphasize that we worked with an architectural firm that helped us identify a master plan and then helped us configure this project that we're going to be voting on. And then we've also shared this project with a construction management firm. So, Rick, you were describing a time frame or a timeline of different projects based on, you used the Lenape gym wall example. That could be something that we might pursue in the near term. So has the construction management firm basically come up with an initial draft of what that timeline of projects and tasks will look like? Because like I have my list from our master plan, and I know what's in it and what we've excluded, but I have no idea of the timing of any of these things. It could be interesting for us as a board to share with the community what we could maybe anticipate to be happening first and middle and last.
I think until you have the actual designs and a new architect, Rick,
I can say this publicly. If I go much further, I might have to go into that session. But this is public knowledge, so it's okay. We are presently seeking RFPs for an architectural firm. It's on the website. One of the criteria that's in that is to get various ideas from these firms as to how they would phase it in. We want to see how creative they are. And then we'll put that together with the one that Palumbo has once we ultimately pick a firm. But we're looking for creativity. They may have something more creative that Palumbo's even thought about.
Yeah, I'm going to join in here for a minute and return to the estimated aid question for a moment. Because I want to make sure that anybody following this discussion isn't left feeling that the matter of the aid rate is completely up in the air simply because SED is required to see actual plans before they go ahead. Yes, SED is required to see actual plans before they calculate which pieces of floor space fit under which aid categories and then come up with the exact amount that they're going to give us back. But everybody has to remember, everybody in this group knows this, but in case there's anybody still watching, you need to remember that the architects that put this plan together are experienced school architects. The construction manager that we retained to review the numbers again and alter them as they saw things that they had a finer comb that they were going through are also experienced school construction managers. And they can look at the general floor plan that's been laid out for the different things that are being done and ballpark that effectively from their own knowledge and prior experience from how that worked out, because they are architects. They are accustomed to actually designing these things out and building them. So they can look at a thing and say, well, that area is going to be, 1,500 square feet, and that area is about 1,500. So they can give us this estimate. Like we said, we've been talking 60% and saying to be conservative because things have different rates and some things aren't aidable at all, that we're going to tell the public we're being conservative and saying a 50% aid rate. But I don't want anyone to come away thinking that that's a made-up number simply because SED only works with precision once final architectural designs have been given to them. That's not the case. The 50% number is really something you can pretty much count on. These are ballpark estimates created by experienced people that have already been working with the rough designs.
That's well done. I even understood it again.
Anybody else? Thanks, everybody. Brings us to committee reports. Audit committee?
Well, the audit committee had its first meeting on September 10th. It was a kind of an introductory meeting. We had a number of new committee members, and actually it worked out to also be the exit interview with the external auditor who we heard the full report from this evening. Thought it was a great first meeting. Even the external auditor was kind of impressed by the group because everyone asked a tremendous amount of questions, which he was surprised about. Actually, I was surprised about, very happy, and I appreciate you guys, all the questions that you did ask, because it gave us a good knowledge of what was actually internal in that report. So the meeting went quite well. After that report, we actually talked a little bit about where do we go moving forward, and we had a little bit of discussion on topics that we can discuss as an audit committee moving forward. So we've got some ideas. I'm not ready to publish those yet, but we've got some ideas what we're going to be talking about in the next few meetings. Our next meeting will be on middle of November, and we'll go from there.
Steve? Facilities also on that same night had an excellent opening meeting. We actually had 100% attendance. We did of the committee members.
I'm a committee member, I wasn't there. Sorry.
Well, we had a very vibrant discussion, primarily in executive session, because it was, by law, needed to be done that way, about developing the RFP. That had to be done in executive session because it has to be guarded very closely to make sure that no potential bidder has a time advantage in hearing what the criteria are going to be. So without going into specifics of how that conversation happened, let's just say that we worked collaboratively, that it was an excellent meeting, that there were substantial improvements made on the original draft. We had very little time to go to reports of active projects underway, progress reports that we got from Rick. But everything is on schedule and within budget, so we're happy about that. Our next meeting is actually the presentation later this month that we talked about, so we're not having that meeting, so our next actual facilities meeting will be in November also. I just want to give everybody a heads up. By the way, personal review here, since I was on the facilities committee for 3 years when we had no community members, and now I'm back on the facilities committee again with community members, I really like the community members. They've been a great asset, and so we do have the possibility of adding a third community member. We've had 2 responses, and so I will get that information to the rest of the committee. I expect by the meeting we have in November, we'll deliberate on the potential for a third member. And yeah, but just give everyone a heads up. I'll get that information. I think at least one of them already got to everybody through Dusty, but we got one more that may not have gotten through, and so I'll make sure that gets done.
Thank you. Financial reports. Treasurer report?
Yes. Yes, so 2 of them. First we have to do the minutes, and then we'll vote on the
Let's skip the minutes.
And then we have.
Item 10, minutes of the meeting. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting for September 17th and the minutes of the special meeting September 24th? Anyone?
So moved.
I'm just wondering, because in the past I see that people don't usually vote on the ones that they haven't been to. So when it's bundled this way, and I'll move it, and then we can have discussions on
He
it.
moved it.
Oh, I'll second. Sorry.
Discussion?
So, yeah, because it's bundled together, could we do this into just 2 motions? I can vote on one and see another.
Friendly amendment? Nick? Is it okay to separate them?
Sure.
Okay, so now you have 2 motions.
You can. It's just weird. Yeah, I'm not.
Okay, so. We're done?
So we'll move the minutes of the 17th.
All in favor of accepting the minutes of the meeting of September 17th?
We're the second,
Who's
you said
second?
both. And there was a friendly amendment separate.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. All in favor of accepting the minutes of the special meeting of September 24th? Aye. Abstentions? Three abstentions.
No, is it 2 or 3?
It's 3. Ruth, Steve, and Julie.
Any nays? No, I'm kidding, that makes sense.
Okay. Now financial. July 2014, and August 2014. to have a motion to accept the financial reports.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
You should be, you worked hard.
Can I have a motion to accept the personnel consent agenda items 12.1 through 12.7?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0. Item 13.1, under old business, the board operational guidelines. A motion to accept the board operational guidelines.
Second.
Discussion. Agreed. All in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0. New business, request for approval of committee on special education recommendations and student placement. Recommendation that the following resolution be approved, be it resolved, the Board of Education of New Paltz Central School District approved the committee on special education and committee on preschool special education recommendations and student placements. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0. Let's do 14.2. Discussion of resolution by the New Paltz Central School District Board of Education.
She needs, she has to. I just want you to know, I just want to say to the board that we've never passed a resolution about having it vetted by your attorneys. So that's just the superintendent speaking, just to remind you of procedures. Now you can move away.
All kinds of resolutions recently without speaking to the attorneys.
Actually, I had everything ahead of time.
But there's no
We need a
legal
motion to
issue.
discuss.
Well, I move, so moved.
Okay, discussion.
Who's second?
Oh, I did.
I'm going to start this first with an advisory. Despite the long agenda that was plainly visible when we came in here, I really did not expect us to be here at 20 to 10 and first be initiated. I sort of thought that 20 to 10 might be around when we were wrapping, even including this, and it's not going to happen. I felt, and I still feel, sitting here right now, that the matter is timely, because since how we act on this could affect how other districts throughout the state are going to choose to vote on resolutions at the convention, and since their next meeting will be the last chance they have to give instructions to their voting delegates about what to do. Not acting on this matter tonight pretty much bars that from happening and substantially reduces the potential impact of what this resolution is intended to do. On the other hand, I find myself concerned that from having experienced this numerous times, that not only are we probably beyond our best working time of the night, but this is coming to you relatively fresh with little background, and so you have to factor in that it's new and that you haven't thought about it coming into the meeting. And so I'm expecting, unfortunately, to really be treating this as an introduction to the topic tonight, with the likelihood that a vote upon it will be delayed to our next meeting. Like I said, even though that will dramatically reduce its effectiveness, we are still a board and we have to act according to best practices. And that to me is something that's even riskier than acting in haste. And so I just want to clear that. I'm not going to try to keep everybody here until 10:30 hashing this out and doing this. Let's just, I'm willing to treat this as an exposure, as a first exposure to the topic tonight, in light of the circumstances. Earlier today, I had also sent along basically the same set of links, but more in a narrative state. If anybody didn't get to their email, you'll find it. It was in there. The background to this the initiation of my exploration for this came largely in response to one of the NISBA Paltz polls being pulled this week under very dubious circumstances. And in seeing that happen, I went back through the website to look at earlier polls and earlier public information that NISBA had been releasing on the topic. And it became very clear that that there was an agenda that NISBA was pushing that wasn't intended to reflect response by the membership to any of the polls. There was even a case that I outlined on September 2nd where they put out a press release about a poll they had taken back in July that only had support ranging from 12 to 23%, and they put it out with a headline saying, school boards are very interested in, no, they're not interested. And poll results show that they're not. Why would you do something like that? So the current poll was reinforcing that, and they pulled it, and I found it very alarming. And so going back and doing the research, I came upon something that maybe the rest of you have already encountered, but not really felt the need to look into deeply. But it started before I considered running for re-election, and I wasn't aware of this new agency that NISBA established inside themselves as a kind of a sub-agency that they're calling the Student Achievement Institute. This was really the biggest red flag that jumped up as I was doing the research. This institute was actually funded in January before any survey of school board opinion on the topic was conducted. First surveys of public opinion on it were undertaken until March, and then going on thereafter. What drew my attention to it is that I saw on the Pulse poll that got taken down, in the fine print on the very bottom of it, there was it said that the NISBA would like to thank the state of New York for providing the funding for the Student Achievement Institute. I said, excuse me, why is that here? I never heard of that thing. So I went back looking. I sent an email to NISBA seeking clarification, and they said, yes, absolutely, that this institute that they're operating is funded by the state. They wouldn't get specific with me where in the state, whether it's coming from SED or from some other state funding source. And they have created a roadshow that goes around basically selling Common Core and testing to school boards throughout the state, and the enticement for you to attend is that it's at no cost. Obviously, someone else is funding it, that's why it's at no cost. The principal speaker at this is Bill Daggett, a very prominent corporate lobbyist for the quote-unquote reform agenda. He's the only featured speaker. He travels around with these events. I could not get clarification on
I gotta tell you, that's the Emerging Trends Workshop that I participated in.
It's not the Emerging Trends Workshop.
Okay, all right.
It's not.
Because I'm going to that one,
No.
and it is done by NISBA through and BOCES.
Okay, it's not the Emerging Trends thing. It's its own specific
it's not
thing. It's
about
called the Student Achievement Institute. I
All
also
right, good, I just want to make sure
I was
that
also
you know
seeking
all the
clarification
schools.
on how this name came up, because it's kind of an Orwellian name. The mission of the organization states right on it that its purpose is to instruct school boards on the benefits of Common Core and testing and how to communicate that to your own public back at home. And so I asked, well, why would you call that the Student Achievement Institute? And they said, well, because we believe that translates into improved student outcomes, so we called it that. I found this name, Student Achievement, in several states throughout America, and all of them are funded and feature materials and speakers, from the Thomas Fordham Institute, from all the agencies that we customarily see funding these lobbying efforts. They literally have their names on hundreds, it's hard to believe, on hundreds of organization names, even though it's only about 10 principal spokesmen that are speaking for them all. And of course, it's impossible to source the funding, but some of it does become public. It's from Gates, it's from the Helmsley Foundation, the Thomas Fordham Foundation, and those kind of things that we hear about. The takedown of the poll was especially alarming because the questions being asked directly pertain to some of the resolutions that are being put forth at the convention later this month, which I highlighted in this resolution draft that I circulated, as well as in the earlier narrative statement earlier today with the links. I don't know. In particular, the one about showing that NISBA, that the school boards of New York actually want additional training on Common Core, and that we're going to press the state education department to require proficiency in Common Core from emerging teachers when they take their licensing exams. That these are positions that the school boards of New York State would take, as if the testing and the Common Core and the APPR that's still being run experimentally is now going to be fully solidified. And it's basically going to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to make the school boards participants in how it becomes inextricable and unmodifiable in the future, because it'll actually, if we're successful, it will result in teachers only emerging with Common Core training rather than the kind of licensing requirements they used to have. So I became very alarmed. I asked NISBA for further clarification on if they receive any other funding besides from the state that's involved in any of these activities, and they declined to answer that question. I assume that as members, unlike the general public, even though it's a private organization, since we are members, we have access to that information. So far, they're not responding, and I asked several times. All of this has led me to feel that we need to take a stand on this. All of this put together, to me, adds up to the necessity of a vote of no confidence. We are being lobbied by other people instead of us lobbying them, which is what we pay our dues to NISBA to do. We don't pay NISBA to be a conduit to us from corporate lobbies and from the state education department. It's supposed to be the other way around. Clearly something has happened at the top. Funds have been transferred, programs have been developed without consultation with the membership. It's clear from the resolutions that they're asking us to vote on later this month what the agenda is that's behind the traveling roadshow that they call the Student Achievement Institute, and Mr. Daggett, who's heading it up. His private materials from this institute are distributed and archived on our website. His privately funded advocacy materials, I've read them. They explain nothing. It's a list of bullet points that explain nothing. They provide no data to show that they're true, that there's any evidence behind any of them. It's absolutely laughable. At least it would be if it weren't so cringeworthy.
Was his presentation the one that includes how many students are not college ready, and there was like a lot of discussion of college and career?
Yeah, that's part of the overview section, but that's not like where it goes from there. That's like the bait. That's how they introduce you to the topic. But basically what they're doing is they're telling us that an experimental program is proven, and we all know that not to be true. They're also telling us repeatedly, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, that an overwhelming majority of New Paltz school boards and individual New Paltz members embrace Common Core, embrace testing, want to see testing have a higher value in teacher evaluation, all the things that we constantly talk about. And I know that out of 700 school boards and approximately 5,000 school board members, there are going to be a few out there that actually do agree with those positions. I just want to clarify, I've never personally met one. So
12 to 23%.
Yeah, 12 to 23%. I've never met one of them, but apparently 12 to 23% of them are out there. That the School Board Association acted so aggressively in pulling information and announcing that no one is to discuss, like if you saw the results, don't discuss it. It actually says that on the press release in which they had, if you all had a chance to see it, in which they took it down. So I personally feel, and that's the immediate problem for this right now, but the larger context in which this is placed is that, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but NISBA has actually never accomplished anything. If you look at its legislative agenda, many of the items date back 10 years. Things that they adopted as things to advocate for years and years ago. A few years back, I spoke to David Little at one of the lobbying conferences that wasn't part of the convention. We went to Albany to lobby our legislators to ask him what's the criteria he uses to decide what's going to get their committee's approval and recommendation and what gets their disapproval. Because we had been disapproved. And one we thought was very good in my second to last year on the board about the agriculture matter and school lunch programs. Basically, the way it works, and given the size of the project, it's easy to understand, is that they are like so many other things, a self-preserving bureaucracy. They want the game to keep outgoing in extra innings as long as possible. They don't want to actually aim at problems and solve them. They want to keep themselves employed. They want to hang around with legislators and lobbyists. They want to go to nice dinners and travel around the state on people's expense accounts. And every once in a while, they'll tell you that they got something done on the matter of filling more bus seats. But nothing substantial ever happens. I challenge anybody on this board to look at their existing legislative agenda and look back at how far in history many of these items were first adopted. None of them get accomplished. And yet here they are trying to rush us into a manufactured approval of new mandates that none of us agree with. That they've been, that they even created a separately financed institute to lobby us and try to manufacture consent for this going to the convention. And I've just about had it. I think that we should make a statement of no confidence. I think that we should make the last round of dues we pay the last dues we pay. I don't know what we get out of them.
So I seconded this to be brought forward because I think that I've heard that this is the first time that we've heard concern over this at this board table. I mean, I've been to board meetings before I was on where I heard there was similar kind of concerns about how NISBA runs its membership. It's not really responsive to the membership. And I think there was a previous board that had also looked at the idea of perhaps not continuing membership with NISBA. So overall, I think that NISBA does have good programs. I think that it's good that there's a place where we can get on board newsletter, that there's training opportunities. But I've also been very concerned about the organization not representing the membership completely. I didn't get a chance to read this thoroughly, but from the skimming that I've done, the concern I have is that it's almost too. I think we could send a message to NISBA and to other board members without having to maybe even go quite this far. So like if we were to cancel our membership with NISBA, how would we get our mandated training? I think that's the first question.
State college online, they don't
put that cost
directly. We pay for it now, even though we're NISBA members. And it's provided online through Empire State College. So we wouldn't lose, the state would not make it legal for us to lose the ability to be trained just because we're declining to pay dues to NISBA. So a substitute.
NISBA is a provider.
Yeah, they're not the, so that we wouldn't lose that.
So that's the first question. And the second question is also in terms of school districts. How many, of all the school districts that are in New York State, how many of them belong to NISBA? Do we know?
As far as from their publicity, they say that it's all of them. They periodically mention between 650 to just under 700. Which would be, they're not putting a specific number on it. It's probably not quite all of them. For me, the bigger issue than that is that something very insidious has happened. Okay, and that's a really serious and egregious matter. This business of the Student Achievement Institute has got to be fought. And these are the people, this is the leadership that created this. This is the leadership that has been struggling to manufacture the appearance of consent for it. They have literally, on September 2nd, they sent out a press release with a headline that said the exact opposite of the poll they were referring to in that headline. The exact opposite. There was 12 to 23% support. Those were the numbers in the poll. Okay? So they're clearly working a program here, and they're working it on us. You're supposed to put your hand up and say, no, this is not acceptable, this has to stop. And the reason that I take it to the point of wanting to express no confidence is that these people have been the institutionalized paid executive staff. They get hundreds of thousands of dollars a year apiece to do this. Supposedly in our name, when anybody in the media wants to find out what school boards in New York are thinking, they call Tim Kramer. That's who they talk to. You can Google it. He's got millions of public statements out there in every media outlet in New York and even nationally. And he's obviously not speaking for us. So I think we do, whatever ends up modified in here, we do actually have to say, because of this Student Achievement Institute, because of the outside funding that's been accepted, to manufacture the appearance of New York State School Board support for programs we oppose by our own agency that we're supposed to, that all the school districts combined pay them about $6 million a year in dues. That's a lot of tax money And we don't pay it out of our pockets, we get that out of the school budget, and so does everybody else. So this is really serious, and I think we need to tell the other school boards that this is the issue, and that it has cost us our confidence in the leadership, and that we want change.
So based on your research, what piper are they watching? Which piper are they watching?
I have not gotten, well, so far, obviously, at least Bill Daggett, because it's his personal lobbying materials that they're using as the educational handouts at these events. They're not NISBA folders, that they haven't even rebranded them. It's actually got the name of his foundation on the top of them. The links are to them.
Steve, can you just briefly explain who Bill Daggett is for people who might not know?
Just in general, he's one of the primary spokesmen fronting for, he's got a long career as a lobbyist for corporate takeover and changes, for data mining. That's one of the big issues here. I left that out. I keep referring to testing and Common Core. But they're very pro-data mining. This is a data mining lecture that they're giving us of why we need this data mining so that our teachers can teach better here in New Paltz, here in wherever you are when you attend this lecture. He is a spokesman, basically. He represents more than one agency. It's difficult to get the full sourcing. That I haven't researched yet. All I've gotten out of NISBA thus far is that they have created this thing with funding from New York State. When I asked them if there were any other sponsors for this program, they wouldn't answer. Although, as I said, at the very least, since it features Mr. Daggett and his own branded promotional materials, that we can at least assume that that his personal two foundations are participants.
Funds from New York State is who, S&D?
I can only guess at that. I asked them to clarify for me, did it come through SED or did it come from some other state budget line, and they wouldn't answer that question.
I'd like to I don't believe that Bill Daggett is a lobbyist. He, in the education circles anyway, he may be gone to the dark side, I have no clue. But he has been what we've called a futurist. He's been an educational voice and researcher for many, many years.
I believe he uses the word like intergovernmental relations or something. I can find it. I'll send it to you.
But he very possibly will. And I just Googled him while you were here. My children would be very proud of me. And if you remember the whole rigor, relevance, and relationships component, he started having those conversations. But as I went down, there's more and more to support what you're saying, Steve, on Common Core, and it's also, he's the one working with the Vermont State Board of Education on, with his message on Common Core standards.
Right.
And it goes on, so that must be his latest.
Right, but this thing right here, the Student Achievement Institute, that's lobbying. That's lobbying us. Someone's ponying up the money, and then they travel around the state.
I saw him present last year at the school board association meeting, and he's a fantastic presenter.
He is.
And he's got a lot of really interesting data. And the conclusion of his presentation was, yeah, Common Core is not perfect, but it's what we got, so we should do it. So it was kind of like an interesting way to get people comfortable with supporting Common Core.
I don't think this board is against
It
it.
wasn't a heavy-handed support of Common Core.
Yeah, no,
But in a way, that's probably.
We haven't had an issue with Common Core though as a board.
Exactly.
We've had an issue with standardized testing, we've had an issue with other things, but not Common Core.
This program, it talks about testing, it talks about APPR, it talks about data mining in particular, which was the one thing that raised so many red flags. No, but the statewide advocate system, like the in-bloom thing, that we finally got shut down. NISBA is currently advocating, I could send you additional links to statements personal articles and essays that Tim Creamer has written and published in On Board and archived on the NISBA website, in which he goes on and on about the wonders of data mining. So, since everybody in New York State rose up to cancel the in-bloom contract, where could he be thinking there are any signs of public support to make this happen? Certainly not with the school boards. Our mission is to protect our students' privacy and work on these issues. There's something going on. That's all you can, that's what's happening, they're taking so much money.
Motivational speaker, that's basically what we've always seen. And then he's come in and he's done workshop and a variety of different things. It happens to be what is trending that he works with. I'm going through NISBA and BOCES, I was recommended to BOCES to do this, to go to the Emerging Trends workshop. Bill Daggett is the speaker in the workshop, and he's doing it out of his program for, because he's got several of them. I just have that here too. But you're right, he works very closely with state officers, school boards, Gates Foundation, and that whole group, so you're absolutely right.
Yeah, these Gates, you know.
I mean, I'm just reading now, just from this improvement network that he's part of. But,
Have we reached out to our other local boards?
no, and we haven't talked about this at the county school boards, have we?
Just to see, with regards to the resolutions that you're going to go up and speak on our behalf against the ones we don't like. I mean, have we talked to the other local boards?
Who's our representative on the school board? Association. Who goes to those meetings? 2 days ago. Gloucester County School Boards Association.
Oh, anybody goes. I didn't know we had a
Could be
representative.
anybody.
We just, now it's open to all board members. But he always likes to go. I mean, I don't think do we have a representative? I've never
You
noticed.
never appointed a representative.
No, I've never, in 10 years, I've never not noticed an appointed or an expected representative. It's open to every
There's a
board
meeting
member.
coming up on October.
I think we all got emails.
Yeah, in answer to Nick's question, this emerged literally over the last 72 hours. My interest in going looking for this information happened on Sunday. That's when I started passing it along to the rest of the board. So it was premature to try to assess what may or may not be going on with other people. For starters, I'm going to assume that this is the kind of thing that most people just, weren't really paying attention to. We get notices from all the time. We get buried under emails and mail newsletter on boards, so nobody would have really been.
Even with regard to the resolutions that are in the NISBA piece that you have to go up, there are those resolutions that are pro, whether it's testing or pro, Common Core or pro whatever it is, they're in there. We were all asked to look at them, right? And they're already in there. So your case here is kind of proven because they're already in there. So my question is, should we be reaching out to the other local boards?
Yes, we
Well,
should.
no,
That's why I was
feedback
hoping to
is
act tonight.
Before we do something like this to this degree?
Well, this I just thought would represent our own opinion. We've done that with numerous statements recently. That's not, and then I would like, the goal that I had was to let the other boards know, as we did with our other recent press releases and resolutions, that this has become the adopted position. I mean, I could go out and say, hi, I'm Steve Greenfield, and I'm pretty upset about this, and that's legitimate, and I could do that, and I could probably get feedback from other boards. But since I know this board well, and I know how we feel about these types of things, I was hoping that even if the language ends up reduced, I mean, for one thing, I just want everybody to know, I wrote the language specifically to be what I thought was the maximum that could possibly happen, because it was going to be reduced. I didn't want to, I probably would cut some things out of this myself. But, but that's what you're right, you start with the whole menu, and then you pick, this wasn't, I'm not saying that I was ever expecting this to be adopted whole. I was providing a menu that I thought we would select from, and at that point, it would carry the weight that a significant school district in New York State is taking a stand on this insidious process. The Student Achievement Institute, the two particular resolutions from the resolution committee that were placed into this convention, the process that they have used to try to sell it, which is on other people's money, and it's weird, and I think we should say that we want it shut down. We want this institute
Just
shut
another
down.
quick point, because I don't think we want to discuss this until too much longer. But last time we had a resolution like this, didn't we talk around this table that wouldn't it be better to put it in more of a letter format?
No, we need letter format, we need snippet format, we need resolution format, we need all of the above.
Yeah, we did that on the last one.
This is very hefty, and I think that it really needs to be thought about, because if you go to the be it resolved part, but just like you said, you went to the extreme. right here, you're losing confidence in the executive staff. They have a whole new set of executive people that haven't even been in those positions. They were just put in now. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to be careful
What
with
are
how.
we looking at? Maybe you just want to name Tim and David, I don't know, but that's why I said if there was a menu, I thought we would work with it.
Yeah,
Not be
okay,
working
I
these
just
nights,
wanted
so we
clarity
don't
on
have
that. The only other thing is, we're mentioning resolutions and amendments that the board hasn't had a conversation about. I mean, does everyone know what the amendment recommendation number 2 is, and the details of it?
Well, I
Are
spelled
you-
that out in here, that what those are.
I know, but they
so,
haven't
you
had,
know.
I don't know how many people, I've only read half of them, and then I put it down. I haven't read them all. I'm gonna go back and reread the ones you
They're
mentioned.
very short. Resolution number 2 that I referred to.
I'm
is
just
the
saying
new-
that I don't
yeah,
think
it's
they're
the new
just-
dues schedule. I was hoping to reject that as a way of saying we reject the dues. That's neither here nor there. The other two, the one is the one that's requesting additional training in Common Core, and the other one is the one that's saying we actually want proficiency in Common Core to be something that the licensing process requires being shown in testing to prospective graduating teachers. I'm hoping you're not going to ask me to go yes on you.
No, I think they're not connected, but it is a full board decision, it has to be discussed, and those are the choices. So I know which ones
We're
you're
not
asking.
going to be voting
So
to
they-
entrench these
yeah.
new mandates.
So I'm going forward with the process and how we're gonna go forward with this, because next time we meet, we're gonna be going over the resolutions that are actually on the table for NISBA, and actually this would then make sense to finalize and have,
Yeah.
done as well.
So that-
And so now the process, I think, would be to have people, if you could send it to us electronically,
Yeah.
that would be great. So that we
I just
can
also,
provide-
that's what I just, we're doing it.
Okay.
As well as the kind of more narrative supporting document.
Right, and then we can supply you with edits and hopefully have a good turnaround document before we meet again that is much more polished, because that's how we've kind of done it before with emergent resolutions. If we do it in particular, we just try to do a quick turnaround on it.
And I will also continue seeking financial information so that we can actually have more data.
Yeah, I took notes on this before this meeting. I felt like there were several things we could remove from this that would actually make it much stronger. And then there are a few things that we could add to it in terms of data. That would be useful.
Like I said, I'm trying to provide and make it not real.
Okay, so maybe what we should do is, we'll go ahead and look it over, and give some thought to it, and either email Steve some edits, or we can have a discussion at the next meeting, at the table, or both.
I think it would also be useful if we're going to consider withdrawing membership from this way, to know exactly what we may be using in that process, just as for my own information, what else besides training, what else do they provide
I
us?
think
So,
we've had that discussion in the past.
We have, but I
I know
don't remember
KT
the
did.
I don't fully recall. I know that it includes discounted training for new board members that we use like, and it's about all I know.
For
Yeah.
$90, that better be some pretty big
And
percent.
Catholic,
their lawyers, their
and
policy
the lawyer.
lawyer.
So,
We should just know what we stand to gain and lose.
I just want to
I got it.
All right, one other question before we close this matter for tonight, and hopefully the rest of the meeting as well, is that distinct from this, there was, I mentioned, an earlier narrative with the same links in them, but presented in more of a research format, then obviously this is not a research format, this is a declaration. The earlier one was in a research format. And since that was my personal work, I'm just wondering if anybody here on our board would be offended if I shared that work with people in other districts and other practices. Just the research component that I did myself, which is not a board position.
No, actually, I
If
was
it's coming
thinking,
from you.
Okay, yeah.
I was actually thinking you
try to go to the Ulster County School Boards Association.
I think,
Just
to answer
Not to
your
say that this is
question,
what we're doing, but just to say that, you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
the perfect strategy is that this is what I've brought to our board that we're reviewing and discussing. And I think it should be a bigger discussion, and so, and our Ulster County School Boards can give you the listserv or send it out right after the president. And you can get out even more, you might even want to find out who our regional rep is and see if you can get it out to them. As long as you present it and say, here are some concerns I brought to my board, and you felt that it might be a concern to others.
That might
That's
be able to
perfectly
sort of
fine.
find the middle ground between not having gotten this done in time and still getting them some things that they might see as actionable in time for their
But
life.
see,
That's not
you
a
are
draft
so-
of the resolution.
No.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
just.
research.
No, I read it.
It's a research.
I'm saying it's
not
just that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't include any of this. And if there's any reference in it, if I put anything in it that's direct communication to us, that's saying something like, I'm going to send you something later that I think we should act on, I'll just edit that out. I'll take those sections out. Those won't be useful to any of us.
I think that'll get your message.
I don't necessarily think that putting this off until the next meeting is going to weaken our position at all. Just not by not having it done in time before the convention. We'll still have a week to set it.
Right, I was just thinking that by that point, all the other boards would have given specific
Right.
instructions, like if they wanted to reverse themselves on, 4 and 9, after reading what we wrote, it would be too late, so.
Well, I would hope that most of our neighbors would not be voting for this
You're
resolution.
talking central New York, you're asking who's in favor, some there's pockets in the North Country, there's pockets in central New York, there's pockets all over that do not believe at all in the vote. Just so that you know, that we are in the minority, we are not in the
But
majority, I'm
interestingly
sorry.
enough, I've discovered that in those areas that a lot of the people are much more firmly against the Common Core itself than we are because they believe that it's a plot to turn children into Democrats. I hear they talk about it all the time. There's a Facebook page called New York State School Board Members Against Common Core, and that is 90% of its population. I read. I read all over the place.
Steve, also, you're the representative that's going to be up there, and I know it's too late for us to send a resolution.
No.
But that doesn't mean at the floor, I'm sorry, are you going to say that? Go ahead.
No, just that it's too late for us to send one in ahead of time, but we could always create one that could, as long as you disseminate it ahead of time, that you could read it, yep. And when I went to,
And that's what I'm.
and that was actually really amazing what I saw when I first went to my first NISBA meeting. I was surprised with how many resolutions didn't automatically pass. And I was also surprised by a privacy one that was created on the floor and had unanimous support, so.
So I'm saying there's power, I think if we refine it. And maybe the resolution that you want is a resolution to put on the floor of NISBA, but to do what you're saying is to reach out first.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
You can always be my researcher.
Other discussion?
How do you like it better?
Public comments? No executive session? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So.
7 people.
That was the quickest, so moved and second, and all in favor.
All in favor?